Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
I hope you're ready. After all, today we are going to plunge into the world of tropical jungle wildlife and the home of some of the most dangerous animals on the planet, announced the guide and left the stage. The music played again on deck and all the passengers went about their business. There was an hour left until arrival at the pier. Some were already on a low start and waiting at the exit from the ship. Some were still having fun and humming their champagne. There were also those who were cutting themselves into cards the whole way, not paying attention to everything else. There were a lot of different people here. They were all on their way to West Africa on the coast of tropical Cameroon. But there was one thing that united all these very different passengers. They all wanted to capture the beauty of the tropical jungle and show off to their friends as soon as possible about what a mysterious and beautiful place they had traveled to. Jacob stood on the bow of the ship and watched how fast this vessel was approaching the pretty coastline. He was a photographer. This occupation was by no means his official job. However, he enjoyed photography very much. He came from Poland and wanted to add some exoticism to his boring life. He worked in a stuffy office, an ordinary manager, but always dreamed of turning his hobby into a real job, bringing good income. The guy often arranged photo shoots for a low price, attracting clients. He was also at different celebrations, weddings, birthdays, graduations, and even funerals. For him, photography was a kind of magic, the ability to stop time in moments to capture. He felt almost like God. Those happy or, on the contrary, sad faces remained forever on the film of his camera. Not many colleagues, friends, and acquaintances were ready to appreciate his hobby. Many times he heard such phrases as, "Oh, what's so hard to click, and that's it. I do not understand why you take money." But Jacob did not give up. He knew that someday he would become a very famous photographer. All he had to do was try. After all, it's not just a click of the camera. You had to find the right lighting angle. And of course, the skill of dexterity had to be present too. Otherwise, how can you capture the laughter of a child who only cries all the time or the moments of real happiness? When a girl finally gets married, each moment must be able to capture, and this is a skill few people have. Jacob was sure of his success, so he went on this cruise, having saved part of the necessary amount of money by hard office labor. It is here in the rainforest. Their boundless ocean could make gorgeous shots that would immediately make him famous. So he thought, so dreamed. Finally, the ship came to develop towards the shore. Most of the guests watched the action with admiration, and some did not care. Sometimes the question was why people with such sour faces went on this trip. Although the answer was obvious, they were just tired. After all, the liner had traveled to this place for many days and nights. And even though there were all the amenities, huge swimming pools, restaurants, large cabins, many passengers were really suffering from not being able to set foot on solid land. They could have taken an airplane. But this particular unforgettable excursion involved traveling on a liner. The tour company was highly publicized and attracted the attention of many people. Everyone wanted to see the beauty of the tropical jungle and, of course, to ride on a real ocean liner. They arrived at a place called Buda. There were many hotels by the sea. This is where the tourists were supposed to check in. A wide gangway was fed to the exit. People immediately rushed to get down on solid ground. And in a minute a traffic jam was formed. Jacob was in no hurry to get off, so he did not even enter the crowd. He preferred to enjoy the seascape for a few more minutes. He thought about how endless this ocean is, and how small he was in this boundless expanse. He was brought out of his thoughts by a man's voice behind Sir. "It's time to go," the sailor said. Jacob nodded and followed the man. He understood their language, but he could not speak it himself. He even tried to learn the language once. He signed up for courses, went, but then his work came up. And after a month, he didn't even remember to study. Now, even though he knew a couple dozen basic words in the language, it was impossible to speak it, of course. But the very speech of foreigners was understandable to him, though with some difficulty. Stepping down the gangway, he immediately smelled the aroma of some delicious spices. Jacob even closed his eyes for a moment to better feel this magical smell. When he opened them, he realized where this wonderful aroma was coming from. There were vendors standing on the wharf and beckoning tourists, showing them sacks of different spices. Jacob risked approaching one of the stalls. The guy tried to ask what kind of spices are these? The natives looked at him with a silly smile and blinked. He didn't understand anything. Jacob, pointing to the bag of spices. After a while, the guy replied, finally realizing what the customer wanted from him. Jacob continued, and only then realized he was speaking English again. The kid merchant was upset, because again did not understand a word. He tried to say something to Jacob, but he was already looking the other way. He was being called out to everyone else by a woman from his tour group. All right, the hell with you. Disgruntled Jacob skipped away and ran to his own. You will now get into these cars and you will be taken to the hotel. There you will leave your things, explained the young girl tour guide. She was wearing long shorts, khaki color, and a white top. Jacob even got a little embarrassed when the girl looked at him with a smile. Jacob, why are you standing there? You do not understand something, asked the guide, approaching thoughtfully that guy. He woke up and blushed even more. I do not. Excuse me, where are the cars? Asked Jacob, embarrassed. The girl laughed and pointed to the side. A lot of big black SUVs were parked there. The boy nodded and ran toward them. The tourists drove through the jungle to the Marion Beach Hotel. The journey took about 20 minutes by car. While they were moving, Jacob and all the other guests admired the beauty of this rainforest. Of course, it couldn't be called untouched nature, as it was a jungle with hotels. And of course, the territory was put in order. Large animals could not be met here, but it was possible to observe interesting and exotic plants, which seemed quite ordinary to the locals. After a few minutes, the tourists finally arrived at the place, which will now be their home for 2 weeks. Jacob was taken away by the hotel staff, and he followed them along the way, observing the gorgeous landscape. The owners of this hotel had done a great job. Now Jacob understood why he had paid so much money. Although in fact, half of the cost of this excursion was paid by his parents, thus making him a birthday present. They always supported him in his endeavors, and for that, the son was very grateful to them. His parents were not particularly rich, but they saved up for this trip for a long time, so that the surprise for their son turned out to be really worthy. The grounds of the hotel were huge. There were wooden bridges that led to the rooms. The villas were built right on the water. There were palm trees, colorful flowers, and bushes planted everywhere. But of course, what struck Jacob the most was the view from the room window. It overlooked the vast ocean. The doorman put Jacob's things by the door and handed him the keys and walked out, leaving the guy alone. Jacob was ecstatic. The first thing he did was jump on their tea bed and enjoyed the stunning ocean view out the window for a long time. After a few minutes, the hotel manager knocked on his room and in English asked him to go to the restaurant where the girl tour guide was already waiting for everyone. Now the guy experienced some excitement in his chest again. He took a deep breath and tried to calm down. True, it didn't help much. He liked this girl very much and wanted to make the best impression on her, so he searched his suitcase for something beautiful. However, everything that could at least a little bit suitable for the first acquaintance there was. A black jacket and pants. Of course, Jacob wouldn't put them on. He would have looked like a white crow. It was only morning, however, it was already very hot. So the guy opted for beach shorts and a shirt with palm trees. He fiddled with the mirror for a long time, and when he looked at his watch, he immediately perked up. He was already very late. So, taking only his cell phone with him, he rushed to the restaurant. The way was not long, and Jacob did not even get confused in the turns. Whether it was luck or he was just well oriented by the signs, but he got to the meeting place almost on time. There were already 20 people seated in the restaurant. However, it was not all of them. Probably all of them were divided into groups, and Jacob almost jumped with happiness when he realized that this girl would be a tour guide in his group. Oh, Jacob, we've been waiting for you. The girl standing on the dais greeted him with a smile. All the guests immediately turned to him, and the guy felt embarrassed again. "Please have a seat in a friendly manner," the girl said and turned to the other guests again. "So my name is Anna, and I will be your guide for the rest of our journey for all questions. Please feel free to contact me." She turned her head and winked at Jacob. The man immediately blushed, but did his best to hide it. He didn't understand why Anna was paying such attention to him. Of course, Jacob secretly hoped that something caught her eye. "Tomorrow we go to the jungle, so please dress as comfortable as possible. Everything else will be taken care of by our team," continued the guide. "And today, rest up, gain strength for our journey." Some of the guests still asked some questions, and then everyone began to disperse. Jacob was brave enough and approached Anna. He wanted to invite her to dinner at the restaurant, but something went wrong, and the guy stuttered at the first word. The girl obviously noticed this strange behavior and decided to take the initiative. "Did you want to ask me something? Friendly?" she asked. Jacob looked at her beautiful eyes and could not tear his gaze away. They were similar, like the sky or the ocean, which was a few hundred meters away from them. And Jacob wanted to swim in those eyes forever. "Jacob, are you all right already?" asked Anna. Jacob, as if struck by lightning. He woke up from that pleasant trance. "Sorry," he mumbled. "You wanted to know something?" The girl asked again. Jacob was about to offer her dinner at the restaurant, but at the last moment changed my mind. Usually girls do not like such a persistent guy, and they'd only known each other for an hour. It was urgent to think of something, and Jacob did not think of a more ingenious idea than to ask where is the bathroom. Anna looked at him in bewilderment, but tried not to show it. She pointed in the direction of the restroom, and when Jacob went there, the girl laughed softly. It was evening. Jacob has already had time to sunbathe in the sun, drink cocktails, and swim in the sea. After arriving, he was very tired, but decided to take a last look at the restaurant. His favorite song was playing there, and he really wanted to go there. Inviting Anna to the restaurant was a very good option. But Jacob decided first to get to know her better. "May I, please?" I put, and. "I think that's it. I don't like to eat when it's hot," said Jacob in English. He had practiced for a long time during the day to make this order. The waiter nodded understandingly and left. The guy looked around and immediately noticed Anna. She was sitting across the table from him and seemed to notice him. "Do you speak the language well here?" she said, smiling. The girl was drinking something from a glass. It looked like white wine. "Thank you. I tried," Jacob answered proudly. He felt like a schoolboy who was praised for a good grade. Suddenly, Anna stood up and walked over to his table. "Do you mind if I sit down?" she asked politely, standing at the table with a glass of wine. Jacob again admired the girl's clothes. The white, open dress suited her very well. "Yes, of course," smiled the guy. The girl pushed back her chair and sat down across from him. Now Jacob was again embarrassed by the gaze of this beautiful young girl. "I'm very excited to be leading the tour here. I've been to a lot of places, but I've never led a tour in Africa," shared Anna. "Do you work as a photographer?" she asked, pointing at the camera that hung on his chest. "So far only part-time," embarrassed Jacob. "And how long have you been working as a tour guide?" But Anna did not have time to answer, as on her shoulder was a heavy, muscular hand of some man. The girl turned around and fake aghast, showing her delight and admiration. Jacob didn't realize what kind of scene was unfolding in front of him. But then the guy realized that all his hopes to make Anna his girlfriend collapsed, because she kissed the jock on the lips. Jacob was even embarrassed by this awkward situation. After all, he thought she was flirting with him. Finally, Anna pulled away from her boyfriend and turned to Jacob. "Jacob, meet my husband Jim." The girl introduced her man. Jacob simply responded with a handshake. From his look, you could immediately understand that he was not happy with the situation. He always had bad luck with girls, and unfortunately, Anna was no exception. "Jim is one of the tourists in my group, Jacob," explained the girl to her husband. Jim only smiled strained. He also did not like that his wife sat at the table to some little familiar guy. Jacob noticed this look and hurried away under the pretext that he was very tired today. Anna once again reminded him about what time they were going to meet tomorrow, and the guy left. Bitter annoyance tormented him for the rest of the night. However, at the end, he accepted the fact that the beautiful Anna would never be his other half. He was able to fall asleep only in the morning and slept only 4 hours. At 8 o'clock, everyone was already standing outside the hotel waiting for their guide. Today, they were to go into the jungle. It was frightening and very exciting at the same time. Jacob took with him only a camera, but just in case, he grabbed a lighter and a couple of paper napkins. This climate was very bad for him. Therefore, it was not impossible that he would get a runny nose. Finally, Anna came out of the hotel accompanied by 3 tall, muscular men. They were carrying many small boxes. "Greetings, ladies and gentlemen," the girl announced solemnly, approaching the group. "At last we will begin our journey. But before we go into the forest, full of dangers, we need to take the necessary equipment, as well as sign some documents." All 3 men put the boxes on the floor. One of them opened the package and took out something dirty green. Anna walked over to them and decided to comment on the contents. "So each of you will be given a special suit that will be comfortable for walking. It has special pockets for water matches, insect right, and much more. So bravely take these things on the dare, and we will go on our hike." Several people immediately ran up to the men and a line formed. All the while Jacob stood waiting for his suit, he looked at Anna, who was explaining something to one of the hikers. Jacob was still mortified. This was not his girlfriend and never would be. "Dear, don't hold up the line, please," asked the man, handing the guy things from the box. Jacob grudgingly took the gear and stepped aside to put it all on himself. Slowly, he got into the suit, putting water and the rest of the items in it. He was surprised to see a clerical knife among the gear. Why would he need it in the jungle? However, Jacob decided not to ask unnecessary questions. "Those who have received all the necessary items, come to me," Anna announced. Jacob looked in her direction. The girl stood at a table and gave each person a form. Jacob decided to find out what was written on the forms. He got in line and after a while finally came to the table. "Familiarize yourself with the document and then sign here and here," the girl explained. "It's all formalities." She tried to say friendly, but it turned out too serious, and Jacob tensed. He stepped aside to read the contract. "In case of injury, or death, I have no claims against the organizers. I am familiar with the safety rules," it said in the contract. The guy was not surprised by this paragraph. As other tourists, he often participated in sports competitions. And everywhere in all the papers there was the same warning. It was really just a formality. However, it was still a bit tense. After all, anything could happen in the jungle. But he trusted this tour company, which in its entire existence had never had any such incidents. Well, or did they just keep quiet about them? Suddenly, a red-hot thought occurred to him. Jacob approached Anna again and jabbed his pen at one of the items. "Did we talk about safety rules?" Jacob asked. He didn't care at all. He knew it was a formality. He just wanted to hear her voice one more time. The girl looked at him skeptically and then answered with a strained smile. "I will announce all the rules later." "No worries," Jacob nodded and handed over the signed contract. A few minutes later, all the documents were signed and Anna spoke again. "And so it's perfect. Now I've instructed you all, and we'll be on our way." Everyone moved as close to her as possible, like they were afraid of not hearing something. The jungle is not something you drive through. When we drove to the hotel, the girl started. "Now we are going to a truly untouched nature, the wild animal house. In this regard, I want you to make sure once again that you have all the equipment. Please keep up with the group and help each other out, if anyone needs help. And now for the most important part. I'm going to ask you all to hand in your cell phones." There was an immediate uproar after this statement. However, after a minute, Anna managed to calm everyone down and continued that all this is done for you in the jungle communication does not catch, so phones will be to you no need. If you wanted to take pictures, then I hasten to rejoice you. With us will go a professional photographer. At first, Jacob thought that the girl was talking about him, so he felt some pride and at the same time embarrassment. However, after these emotions came disappointment, when from behind Anna came Jim with a camera. Jim will take quality pictures of you for free. Will you be satisfied? Satisfied, announced the girl. The tourists immediately calmed down and changed their minds. All of them gladly put their gadgets in special boxes. We are responsible for your electronics, so you cannot worry. She safely laughed Anna. And now let's get to the most important thing. She switched to a serious tone. Sometimes there are situations where you may get lost, but don't worry. Each of you will now be issued trackers. On them there is a special red button, pressing which you will immediately call the rescuers. The men who were holding the boxes started handing out the trackers. Jacob looked at the flimsy device with disbelief. It was definitely not protected from any exposure to water, so he had to be careful with it. When everyone had checked the equipment for the 1000th time, the campers settled into the SUVs that were taking them into the thick of it. They drove through beautiful terrain again, past other hotels. Anna was narrating their itinerary. So, she said, "First of all, we will go to see the waterfall. It is the most mesmerizing and magical place where we will be able to take amazing pictures and, of course, make a wish." After 10 minutes, the tourists were dropped off right on the road. To the right, there was already trampled path along it. Apparently, 1,000 tourists passed by. After all, it was the most famous place of the Step Waterfall, very impressive show. For about 10 minutes, the group was going up the mountain and finally got to the right place. Jacob immediately ran to take his stunning shots, tried to choose the best location, but everyone was already crowded around, and it was impossible to get a good spot. Jim had already started taking pictures of everyone, and there was a crowd around him too. Jacob was very angry, but he still managed to find a secluded place from which he could see the waterfall very well. The guy took a few shots and was about to leave, when suddenly someone's hand touched his shoulder. He turned around in fright and saw a low Yaroslav man. Standing next to him was an equally small girl. "Is that your camera?" asked the man, pointing to the object in Jacob's hands. "Yes, mine," answered the frightened boy. "I'll take a picture of me and the girl, because this Jim is already all over the place." "I'm not a tourist photographer," indifferently replied Jacob, and was going to pass by. The men moved to the main group, but the tourist blocked his way. And at that moment, Jacob tripped on a rock and fell to the ground. To him, frightened girl ran up to him and tried to help him get up. Jacob unhappily got up from the lunatic and looked around. He dropped a bottle of water, which he opened and got angry. Picking it up, he looked around himself. His palms were muddy, his sleeves were muddy too. "What have you done?" shrieked Jacob at the pair. The girl looked at him fearfully, and the man pressed his lips together guiltily. "I'm sorry," the boy gave the man's voice. "What do I need your apology for?" The boy continued his indignation with quick steps, full of just indignation. He sprinted downstairs, where a group of him was already gathering, spotted by Anna. "Uo," she pronounced, looking at Jacob. "You're all right." "Yes, much better," sarcastically replied Jacob. The girl looked away embarrassed and continued talking to the group. "Well, everyone is gathered, which means we can go to the jungle. On the way I will tell you about the beauty of these wonderful forests. But remember, there are a lot of wild animals here, so keep the taser in your pockets with you, okay?" Well, we're off. The tourists followed the guide, and Jacob was still turning away from the mud. Having calmed down a little, he began to catch up with the group. Before he knew it, he had caught up with the guide. "So, and here we will stop, and you can take pictures," she announced to the group, and then turned her head towards Jacob, who was no longer eager to take pictures. The boy just sat down on the nearest rock. They weren't in the thicket of the jungle yet. From here, they could still only see the waterfall now. And looking at the terrain, Jacob realized that he had sat down under a tree that was icy. Though there were similar plants everywhere here, the group once again flanked Jim, and he quickly clicked the shutter of his camera. What did Anna see in him? He was even holding the camera unprofessionally. Jacob was very indignant at this fact, suddenly sat down to him, the one he was just thinking about. "How are you?" Quietly, she asked, looking directly at him. Jacob turned his head and examined the girl. That hiking suit suited her very well, but as soon as the guy remembered her husband Jim, immediately gloomed. "It's okay," he indifferently replied, turning his head away. He looked like a hurt boy, and he realized it himself. "I was told you fell." Concerned, inquired Anna. "Yes, I fell." In the same cold tone, the boy answered. "I don't think your mood was ruined because of that." "What else could it be?" The boy muttered. The girl was silent, but Jacob knew the answer to that question. His mood had been ruined yesterday when he saw Anna's shoulder being touched. That muscular arm. Jacob had always been a very lovesick person and took any blows of fate hard. He had no experience in relationships. Girls always bypassed him. But the reason was definitely not in his appearance. The guy was quite handsome, athletic, and young. He was just too nerdy. He didn't think he was better than anyone else, but he often allowed himself to correct those whose assertion was clearly wrong. Or maybe the reason revealed itself in the fact that he was still living with his parents, though at 22 that wasn't such a shameful thing to do. Either way, whatever the real reason was, girls were still avoiding him. The group was already starting to gather again. Anna got up from the rock and walked towards them. Jacob pulled himself together and followed her. "So what you saw was still a flower. And now we are heading into the real jungle. Please be vigilant and do not defend," explained the girl guide. People followed the guide, Jacob along with them. The road was not an easy one. The path was very often very narrow and slippery. Sometimes you had to step over thick roots of plants. There were vines hanging from every step. In just a few minutes, they were able to see the first real creatures of wildlife, the monkey. Not all the tourists had time to see this monkey because it jumped lightning fast through the trees and instantly flew over their heads. Some were upset. However, Anya assured them that this was not the purpose of their hike today. After all, they were now going to an area where tigers lived. Unfortunately, it really took a long time to get to them. But the girl guide entertained her group with the most interesting facts about the jungle. Therefore, the tourists were not so boring to wade through the thickets. Once again climbed over a fallen tree. Jacob noticed some movement. He looked around, but saw no one. But then, looking closer, he noticed the tail of a parrot, and then his own. He was sitting on a tree branch and brushing his feathers. Jacob decided not to shout to everyone about what he saw, otherwise people would scare away the cautious bird. Instead, the guy decided to take a few shots on his camera. The group walked slowly. He would definitely not lag behind. Jacob carefully, without sudden movements, took out the camera and began to look for a good angle. But he could not get it. Then the parrot hid his head behind a wing or turned around. So it was not clear what kind of bird it was. But after several unsuccessful attempts to shoot this wonderful creature, Jacob still managed to find a good position. And as soon as he clicked, the parrot immediately flew aside on another branch. The shot turned out blurry and incomprehensible, but stubborn Jacob could not allow this bird to remain unrecorded. He'd be biting his elbows for the rest of his life. So the guy approached his victim again. It flew in again. Jacob chased it again and again, and he finally got a really amazing shot. It very successfully captured the parrot in all its glory. Especially well turned out wings. If you zoom in on them, you could see them in great detail. Jacob for a minute admired this masterpiece, and then with a happy face decided to return to the line. But when he went in the direction he thought he had just come from, Jacob realized that this was definitely not where he had been and turned around in the opposite direction. Now he was confused and didn't know where to go. Any path made him doubtful. He decided to orient himself by the branches, because they were the ones he was looking at when he was chasing the parrot. Because of his excitement, he began to be overcome by heavy doubts. However, Jacob decided to listen to his intuition and went in the right direction, in his opinion. He walked for about 10 minutes, but never came to a familiar path. The guy began to get more and more worried. He began to calm himself. Maybe he simply missed the path where he should have turned. Jacob turned back, began to look, but through the huge leaves of liana plants and trees, could not make out anything at all. Suddenly, he heard some kind of hissing. He was terribly alarmed. Jacob slowly turned his head, and his soul took to its heels. On a branch of a tree that was a couple of meters away, from it sat a snake, a huge snake, and it was also completely different from what he had seen once in his native forest. Jacob froze. He had read many times that when you see a snake, you should just stop and let it go, which he did. Sweat slowly dripped from his face, but not a single muscle trembled. The snake, on the other hand, hesitated for a couple minutes, and then descended from the branches to the ground and crawled past the guy with a sing-song. Jacob waited a few more minutes motionless, to be sure not to run into this deadly creature. Then he exhaled a sigh of relief, but unfortunately, being saved from the snake didn't solve his even bigger problems. He was still alone in the dense jungle, and it was still unclear where he was. Jacob walked a few more meters and came to a small clearing. It was very cozy here, if you ignore the fact that he was completely lost. The sun shone cheerfully through the crowns of trees, and its slanting golden rays fell on the emerald-thick grass. In the distance, Jacob saw a monkey deftly jumping from one liana to another, but he was no longer impressed by this sight. He panicked. His heart beat more often, his hands were sweating. Suddenly, he remembered Anna's words. Everyone will have a tracker. Press the red button and the rescuers will come for you. The boy looked at his wrist and could not believe his eyes. The life-saving bracelet was gone. On the other hand, it was not there either. Jacob frantically searched for something in his pockets and backpack. The search was unsuccessful. Tracker was nowhere to be found. It was only after a few minutes that Jacob had an epiphany when he tripped and fell. It wasn't just water he dropped. The GPS tracker fell off my arm too. Jacob didn't even notice. Now he was left completely alone without food, water, and without the ability to call rescuers. The guy sat down on a rock and almost cried. Soon, and the day would be coming to an end. He thought, it gets dark quickly in the jungle. And indeed, the sunset was slowly drifting away. To help, I'm here yelled as hard as I could. Boy. He screamed again and again until he was completely hoarse. But no matter how many times he tried, there was nothing and no one. Then he had the horrifying, but perhaps fictitious, idea of making a fire. The smoke was bound to be seen by someone. He had often seen on the news how people were found thanks to the smoke from the fire. So Jacob decided to repeat the experience. He found some dry branches lying near the trees. 10 minutes later, he himself took a whole pile. Now it was only necessary to set it on fire. Jacob found a lighter in the pocket of his jacket and brought it to the twigs. The twig lit up nicely and immediately went out. This was the first time Jacob had encountered such a problem. And finally, he realized. It was all caused by the immense humidity. The kindling here wasn't so dry, and it didn't burn well. So Jacob found some dry leaves and put them under the branches, took out a lighter and lit the leaves. A small flame engulfed the dry leaves and then spread to the branches. At first, Jacob was pleased with what he had done. However, then his luck turned away from him. When the fire had gotten hot enough, the flames suddenly spread to nearby branches and dry grass. The fire began to climb toward the larger trees. Jacob now looked on in horror as the kindling and fire was almost reaching the dense thicket. Disaster was inevitable. The guy tried to put out the flames with his jacket, but nothing helped. He began to have the most real panic. His palms were sweating. Cold sweat appeared on his body. His eyes darkened and it became difficult to breathe. His throat constricted. Just a moment more. He'd just burned to death in here, in this damn jungle. Suddenly, he heard the distinct cracking of branches behind him, under someone's heavy footsteps. Jacob turned around, hoping that he had been found. But the sight he saw frightened him even more than the fire. He recoiled and almost fell into the fire. There was a gorilla staring back at him. The animal seemed so huge. The boy just stood still. It was as if he was burrowed into the ground and was afraid to make any movement. The gorilla was not afraid of anything, including the man. It picked up some huge green leaves and began to throw them into the fire. The fire died down. Jacob timidly approached the trees and began to help. Burning picked up the wet leaves. Then the animal grunted and began to throw a handful of sand into the fire. And Jacob, overcoming the fear of this huge creature, helped him in this as well. Together, they were able to put out the fire. Jacob could not believe that all this was happening to him. To think that a wild animal helped to put out the fire that had started. But the guy still shunned the gorilla. Wild animals are unpredictable and always pose a danger. That he knew for sure, especially gorillas. These giants are very strong. And a fight, if it happens at any rate, will end in death for an unarmed man. But this gorilla didn't seem to have any intention of hurting him. It began to walk away slowly, but all the time it turned its head and made some movements with its huge long arms. Jacob could not understand what this animal wanted from him. The guy continued to stand in place and looked after the departing burn, and that as if waiting for him. And now it stopped again and looked at Jacob with a long attentive look, but the guy still did not move from his seat. He did not understand what she wanted from him. After a few minutes of such silent tactics, the gorilla moved back to Jacob. The guy was seriously startled and began to back away slowly, again without making any sudden movements. But the gorilla kept speeding up its step, and then Jacob so panicked that he rushed into the forest. He knew it was best not to run from animals, but now he was terrified, and running could save his life. Jacob had never been known for his speed, but now he could easily win all the school Olympics. And not only school Olympics in running, including sprints. The gorilla, not thinking long, ran after him in a huge race. After a few minutes of this frantic race, Jacob began to pant, but continued to run. After all, his life depended on it. But still the huge animal caught up with him. Suddenly the gorilla came out of a thicket and grew a furry colossus right in front of Jacob, and he ran straight into its immense figure. The boy froze and trembled with fear. But that's it. Here comes my death, he managed to think. But the gorilla rose on its hind legs, walked past the lad and poked him in the back with its heavy meal. Jacob involuntarily moved forward like a puppet led by a puppeteer. He really felt like a puppet. Then the gorilla began to push him in the back regularly, and Jacob had no choice but to go wherever she pushed him. Thus, they came back to the clearing where they had recently met. Jacob gradually realized that he was in no danger, and this monkey still just wanted to take him somewhere. The guy hoped that it would not be its ancestral home. Maybe the animal knew where the exit from the jungle was and was pushing him there. Hopefully, he thought. And so they walked side by side for quite some time. He had long since lost track of time. On the relative plain, they descended into some lowlands. Only now Jacob realized that all this time was far above sea level. However, the place where the gorilla led the guy was not at all like an exit from the jungle. On the contrary, it seemed to be the deepest part of the rainforest. And then Jacob saw many people in strange attire. He realized that it was some kind of local settlement in the middle of the jungle. Finally, an old man noticed the new arrivals. He was probably the chief. At least, so it seemed to the haggard men. To the boy this chief, as Jacob mentally dubbed him. With a proud gait, he approached the poor guy and asked him something. But Jacob did not understand a thing. This language was completely unfamiliar to him. The boy stood and looked at the leader with naive eyes. The old man repeated his question. And only now Jacob realized that this is not some unfamiliar language of the natives, but ordinary English. Apparently, from fear, he had forgotten how people speak. And it seemed that the leader asked him who he was. Jacob thought a little, and then, but terrible English with an accent to twist words, said, "I am Jacob tourist. I need a hotel. I'm lost. You help me." The leader looked at the strange stranger in bewilderment. The whole village was watching them. Who was this stranger and where did he come from? After a few minutes and a dozen questions, the old man realized that he would not get anything out of this frightened young man. This guy didn't understand anything, and he couldn't even speak. The leader ordered to give him a hut and food. The young girls fussed and started running around, following orders. One of them approached Jacob, took him under the arm, and led him deep into the village. The boy turned around, but the gorilla who had brought him here was nowhere to be found. for a second, he thought that he imagined it all because of the lack of water. He must have found the village by accident. The girl sat him down on a log that was used as a bench. Opposite him on the same log sat two boys, about 10, 11 years old. They were discussing something animatedly, but Jacob could not understand a word. And looking in the chassis, he realized that the improvised benches were around the fire. The guy assumed that this is where various meetings are held, and perhaps cooking food. However, the second option he immediately discarded. As soon as he saw a man who had a special table for food and a stone device that could be called a brazier. The man was already roasting something on the fire, and Jacob hoped it was food for him. This whole trip had made him very tired. He was very hungry, and he was also terribly thirsty. But the girl who accompanied him had disappeared, and he was ashamed to ask the boys for water. So Jacob decided to get water himself. Surely there must have been something like a well. The boy stood up and surveyed the area. The village was quite large. To the right and left were small houses. They were mostly all made of clay and bamboo. He passed by a cook who had a separate hut for cooking. I guess you could call it a kitchen or even a restaurant. Jacob grinned. After passing a few more cabins, he came to an uninhabited area. Further on, the jungle stretched out again. Jacob never found one. But he did hear a soft sound and a rustling. It was definitely a stream. At first, he wanted to ask one of the locals if it was possible to go there. But there was no one around, and he was so thirsty that he decided to go there. One stream could be heard very well. Clearly, it was not far away. No one would notice he was missing. Jacob walked down the small, not densely packed slope and headed for the water. The sun was already hiding behind the horizon, and the water reflected a beautiful orange sunset. The boy was very happy when he saw the crystal clear water. First, he decided to wash his face and tidy up a bit. His face was smeared with dirt, and understandably so. Jacob put out fires and then ran from a gorilla that ended up saving his life. All these events were whirling through his head. And the guy thanked God that he was able to find some civilization, if this society could be called civilized. What if they were cannibals? The thought made him break out in a cold sweat again. He tried to distract himself, washed his face, and drank the cool water greedily for a long time. She seemed like a blessing to him. The water was so pleasant that Jacob decided to take a little swim. He took off his shoes and dipped his feet into the rivulets. What happened afterward was etched in his memory forever. Sitting by the creek with his steps submerged in the cool water, he saw in the distance some floating log. Then it seemed to him to be a man lying down altogether. After a few more seconds, he saw someone's eyes on the log. Clearly not human eyes. Suddenly, Jacob realized that it was not a log at all. It was a real crocodile. The giant predator shows out of the water more and more. Quickly approached Jacob. Young man, how glued. Sat on the shore and looked at this horrifying sight. It was as if he had frozen from shock. He was pulled out of his stupor by a piercing scream. "Run, save yourself. Run, you idiot," shouted a woman's voice from behind in English. Now Jacob didn't need to be told again. Twice he tore from his seat like a good sprinter. The boy raced away from the creek back into the depths of the jungle. At this point, he didn't care where he ran. As far away from the fearsome beast as possible. The chase was on. The crocodile didn't seem to have organized. And Jacob calmed down a bit and stopped, breathing heavily. After a few minutes, the very girl who had sat him down by the fire and promised to give him a tour of the village approached him. She seemed to be the one who had saved him. She was now dressed in hunting clothes. If you could call it normal clothing, she was wearing some sort of linear, short bandage, covering everything below the waist, and the same bandage barely covering her breasts. Jacob was even a little embarrassed to see her like that. After all, in the village her clothes were more closed. "How did you even end up here?" she shouted in good Polish. Jacob was amazed. What is this? The effects of repeated shocks so affected that he began to understand the natives. "Well, I was brought by a gorilla," embarrassedly began to answer the guy, feeling like in a bad nightmare. No, the fool is not in the village. And here by the stream the girl was angry. I wanted a drink of water, and it seemed to me that nothing would happen. If I just took a sip of some clean water from the brook, a creek, do you know that in this nice creek it's awfully dirty? There are dangerous animals in that part of the jungle. Only hunters are allowed in that part of the jungle. I didn't know. I just wanted to. I don't care what you wanted. I'll take you back to the village to the chief. Let him decide what to do with such an idiot. Jacob guiltily lowered his head. It seemed to him that he was a delinquent schoolboy who was reprimanded by the teacher. In the end, of course, the guy obeyed and went after the girl. This village was his only chance for salvation. What's your name? After a few minutes of silence, asked Jacob. The girl seemed to understand his language very well. Indifferently answered the stranger, removing leaves with a stick. That name means something. Well, that means, the girl said snidely. But you don't need to know it. Say your name. Jacob, said the guy, following her. Jacob, Coco interrogated. And what does that mean? And then the guy smiled victoriously. He had waited his whole life for such a question. It could seem that his head even climbed up from pride. Strong, pronounced Jacob confidently and proudly. Strong and brave. That at the creek I did not see any manifestation of these wonderful qualities, said Coco. Jacob felt offended by such a remark. Yes, he really was not particularly strong physically, but mentally he was a very serious competitor to many potential opponents. However, no one seemed to care about that here. They had almost reached the village when suddenly Coco asked, pointing at his shoulder, "What's that you've got there?" Jacob at first didn't understand what she meant. However, then guessed what caught her attention was a camera. The guy explained. Camera. Clumsily pronounced, the girl swallows half of the sounds of the device that helps you take pictures. Photo. What? Then Jacob realized that this local beauty, really very far from civilization. And really, how could she know of the existence of such a beautiful machine here in the jungle? A beautiful picture, a piece of the past that you can look at an infinite number of times, the boy explained. He felt as if he were talking to a child. The people who were far removed from such basic things were indeed like children. Even modern city children knew much more than these natives. Jacob still didn't understand why tribes like this still existed. The world has long gone far away. Progress has reached its peak, and there are still somewhere people who still roast meat on the fire. And not just shish kebab from the store, but meat that they themselves and extracted. And there was no need to say anything about education, views, politics. These people did not understand such things and, unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, did not want to understand. They were happy here, away from it all. When they reached the place, Coco put him on the same log from which he had run away. The boys, on the other hand, were gone. A brief twilight came, and then abruptly, in an instant, as happens in the southern latitudes, solid darkness. After a while, Jacob finally saw in the distance, by the light of torches, Coco and the old man of the chief coming toward him. This time, the tribal leader did not waste time in English, but delivered an angry monologue in his native tongue. And Coco began to translate it into Polish. My father is very angry at your behavior. No one leaves this village without warning. He decided to help you, thus taking responsibility for your life. Responsibility. Jacob interjected. It is the custom. We are not often ordered to us wanderers, but if they do, we try to help them properly. We are taking you under our wing, and it is our job to keep you alive. Tell the chief I'm sorry. I was just thirsty. The girl said something to the chief, and the man listened to her glumly. He looked at Jacob incredulously. He said something to Coco and walked away, tapping his cane on the ground. The girl stepped closer to the boy and declared, My father gave you a hut. Now I will take you to where you can eat. Jacob's eyes rounded. That was your father. Why does that surprise you so much? As if even insulted Coco, and then abruptly turned around and walked away, leaving the guy alone again. Jacob was extremely surprised and even discouraged. He himself did not understand why he had such a strange reaction. For some reason, he thought that the old man had no one. It was surprising to see such a young girl and know that she was the daughter of a profound old man. Jacob might have assumed she was his granddaughter. But daughter, his musings were interrupted again by the appearance of Coco. "Let's go," threw the girl and took the boy's hand. She pulled him behind her, and he, like an obedient puppy, followed her. They came to a hut. It smelled of meat. Do these natives really know how to cook? The guide and the girl entered the room, and Jacob was even surprised that there was a real wooden table with wooden chairs. After all, civilization had not gone so far from them. The interior was very similar to the old Slavic hut. Only the hut itself and all the furnishings were made of bamboo. The girl sat him down at the table and left. To what? That must have been where the kitchen was. The guy once again looked around the house, the table, chairs on the wall, some herbs, honored, incomprehensible objects. Jacob didn't have time to look at everything yet, as Coco came back again with a full plate of food. What was even more striking was that the plate was clay. That meant that their pottery art was thriving as well. They have every chance of being a great community, thought the boy. The dish consisted of meat steak and some kind of very tasty sauce. In a separate cover, they served a strange cereal. "What is it?" With distrust in his voice, Jacob asked the girl. "Food," arrogantly replied Coco, sitting down across from the guy. "I understand, but what exactly is the food?" Suddenly the guy felt like an idiot. He was given a night's lodging meat, which is clearly not given to everyone. And he's showing off. "This is meat," as she pointed her finger right at the steak, "and this is porridge. Eat it, and don't kick it. It's not every day you get a meal like this. But your father said you look very malnourished, so today you can eat something we don't eat very often." Jacob looked at the dish once more and was about to start eating, as suddenly realized that he did not even have a fork, but something like a fork. Pitifully, he asked. The girl left again for the thing and came back with a wooden spoon. She handed him this cutlery. "We eat meat with our hands," with a chuckle, she explained. "But for you guest, I'll make an exception." Jacob, of course, was a little surprised, but remembered that these people are Aborigines. They live by their own rules. After a few minutes of lively eating food, Jacob still dared to ask another question. "And how do you know Polish?" "Since childhood." "Not interested," replied Coco, looking as another spoon is sent into the mouth of the guest. "And why then only you speak the language, and so well?" The girl was silent. She clearly wanted to say something, but for some reason it was hard for her to do it. "My mom and I were in a plane crash." Finally, she spoke. "When I was 5 years old, we were flying to the sea, then a terrible blow. I don't remember anything else. Once here, we didn't know what to do and finally found this village. A month later, the chief made my mother his wife. But a few years later, she died. Aya stayed here." "I'm sorry," Jacob said sympathetically. He was always afraid to fly, and apparently not in vain. "If you don't die in the crash, you'll fall prey to all sorts of predatory creatures, or starve to death. That's why Jacob was so scared when he got lost. He thought that he would stay forever in this wild place, and he would be eaten by predators or bitten by a snake, or he would just die here for nothing. After about a minute of silence, Jacob decided to speak up again. "Thank you for what?" surprised asked the girl. "For saving me from that crocodile. And for the food is not necessary to thank me." "Speak, thank your father." "He saved you. I'm just running an errand." "It must be hard on your father." "Why did he lose his favorite wife?" The girl was a little embarrassed, and then let out a small laugh. "I don't think it's hard for him." "Jacob." Coco giggled. "He has 8 other wives, and all of them are alive and well, and his children can't even be counted." Jacob is in complete shock. Look down at him. 8 wives. He almost shouted. Yes, Jacob and all of them he loves continue to make fun of him, Coco. The guy, to digest this information, asked the next important question. "You weren't always called Coco, were you?" The girl's face darkened. It seemed that she still regretted something. "No, of course not," she answered politely. "It's my old name that my mother gave me, Alice. She always called me Alice. When the chief married my mother, I was given another name for my new life. My mother changed her name too, and I was only 5 years old, so I did not resist. Everything seemed like a game to me then. So what is the significance of the name Coco? The girl smiled again, and there was no trace of her sad face. But I don't know, maybe beautiful, she said flirtatiously. But why should a name have any meaning? Do you care? A name can say a lot about a person. Why is that, I tell you? Isn't that you? Making friends with the spirits? To my people, name matters, yes, but to me it's just a bunch of letters. In confidence, I had so much fun when I was 5 with the chickens repeating Coco over and over. It's probably stupid. But at that moment, I didn't think about anything else. I said I'd be called Coco. Sounds like a really good name to me. I'm not arguing. The boy smiled. He finally finished his portion, even though he was hungry. Coco dragged him outside. Dad said to take you to your cabin, but I want to show you something. Jacob nodded and followed his mysterious mistress. By now she no longer looked like she was by the stream. She was wearing a light white dress or tunic obliged by a sash. It might even have been night. However, it was hardly their custom to walk in night attire with a stranger like Jacob, but this girl was clearly guilty. Not to all the traditions of this people, she seemed free and intelligent. Jacob didn't manage to speak to the rest of the population, but he wouldn't have been able to. Only Coco spoke Polish here. And it was a great luck and a real miracle under the circumstances they came to some clearing hidden by trees. Jacob possessed a feeling as if he had fallen into a fairy tale. Everywhere flew, light and grew the most beautiful plants, which Jacob had never seen anywhere. He already wanted to take out his camera and start taking pictures of this fabulous beauty. But what stopped him? Let you show your magic thing in action later. For now, just enjoy the stars, pronounced the girl. The guy raised his head and was shocked by what he saw. Everything was dotted with a scattering, the brightest stars, myriads and myriads of sparkling lights, mysterious darkness. And such a sight is not seen much anywhere. Here the sky seemed fabulously unreal, as if he was not in the jungle, but on some other unknown planet millions of light years away from old Earth. Jacob looked, but the doll was sitting in the grass, looking upward. Her eyes reflected the entire cosmos. It was something eternal, unthinkable, unimaginable. The whole image was somehow so in harmony with untouched nature, with this impossible beauty around. She was so engrossed in the spectacle of the night sky that she didn't even notice Jacob taking her picture. The girl only heard a faint click. "What did you do?" Startled, she shrieked. She jumped up from her seat, but the guy just walked over to her and showed her the finished picture on the small display. His expensive camera had this feature, something Jacob was very proud of. The girl took a long and incredulous look at the image. "Is that me?" Coco asked with some naivety. "It's you," confirmed the guy, sitting down next to her. The picture was indeed wonderful. It showed the beautiful Coco sitting surrounded by the rainforest and looking upward with her head down. And in the background, the endless black sky is studded with sprinkles of stars. This picture would sell very well, Jacob thought. "Could you take more?" Coco suddenly asked. The guy nodded affirmatively and put the camera in front of them, beforehand turning on the delay. After a few seconds there was a click, and then a flash, like a small lightning bolt, dazzled them, and for a moment the selfies were ready. "It turned out really cute," Coco said, embarrassed. She looked at him with eyes that sparkled with happiness and delight. "You'll teach me to do the same." Jacob felt a certain pride. Finally, his talent was appreciated. "I will," Jacob replied with a smile. He looked at the doll and could not take his eyes off her. She was so beautiful against the backdrop of all that fabulous nature. He wished they could sit like that for eternity, but this idyll was interrupted by a roar from the jungle. The whole fairy tale immediately evaporated, and only the menacing reality of the wild rainforest remained. "We should be worried," said Coco. They walked towards the village. On the way, the boy got a chill, but he didn't pay much attention to it. They stopped at the hut he had been given for temporary shelter. "Here you can finally rest," the girl said with a smile. "Good night." Jacob did not hide his new sympathy. His answering smile brightened up to his ears. "Sweet dreams, Coco," whispered Jacob. The girl walked off in the opposite direction. It turned out that their huts were located opposite each other. He He watched her for a long time. She looked back a few times and got embarrassed. After giving her a glance, Jacob still managed to overcome himself and entered the hut. The place was as simple as the previous dude of grass on the floor. A low, huge tray of unknown purpose and a bamboo curly leg. Jacob lay down on the soft, soulful bed and immediately forgot himself with sleep. And his thoughts again carried to that clearing where he sat just now how much the girl sat motionless, again watching the stars. Jacob cautiously approached her and sat down beside her. That's how they would have sat. But Coco suddenly asked suspiciously, "Why are you lying?" "Lying?" The boy asked incredulously. "It's not her you love, it's me." The girl turned her head to him, but it was no longer Coco, but Anna. "So who do you love?" Jacob, in a sneaky way, asked the guide. The guy wanted to be here less and less. He broke into a cold sweat, then threw into a fever. "I am your love," or this worthless Coco screamed at the top of Anna's voice, turning into some unknown monster. Jacob was terribly frightened by this. He tried to run away, but his legs turned to stone and wouldn't listen to him. He stayed in one place and tried with all his might to escape from there. "You're not going anywhere," the girl whispered. "Snake." And at that moment her face was so distorted that he cried out in terror and woke up in a sweat, covered with anxious goosebumps. Jacob tried to recover his heavy breathing. This was the ultimate nightmare. He was terribly festering. His head ached terribly. It felt like it was about to split open. Jacob decided to go outside, to breathe. The images from the nightmare finally dissipated, but he still felt all his body unbearable, muscular pain. He was broken, twisted, and tormented. He didn't realize what was happening to him. The village was quiet. It looked like everyone was already asleep, however, in some huts. There was still a weak fire burning. The boy decided to sit on a log by the extinguished fire. From here he could see the stars very well. He was shaking with a small tremor, but still remembered the doll and her glowing eyes. This girl in just a few hours had managed to draw him away so much. He couldn't think of anything but her. Her beautiful blonde hair neatly braided into somewhat intricately their pigtails, bottomless eyes in which you could see the cosmos. The guy realized that he had fallen head over heels in love with that land of polished descent. Could it be that fortune finally turned the right way and he could find his happiness? But Jacob did not like to think ahead and make plans deep into the night. He made the decision to go back to bed and try to sleep, ignoring the pain in his head, which was only getting worse. He went into the cabin, but when he wanted to lie down, he realized that it wasn't his bed at all. There was already a man lying on it. As he got used to the darkness, he realized that this house was much more spacious, and there was more than one bed. Then he began to distinguish someone's silhouettes. Someone had lit a fire, and then Jacob heard a piercing scream. There were women screaming from two sides at once. They all lit their lamps. It was only then that Jacob realized that he had mixed up the huts. There were so many women and girls here, and many were completely leggy. He immediately turned away so as not to embarrass them. "Please excuse me, I seem to have mixed up the huts. I didn't mean to." The guy started to make excuses. Suddenly someone's hand touched him and then pushed him outside. He found himself on the street. Raising his head, Jacob saw Coco. She was covering herself with some sort of cloak. "What are you doing here?" She hissed at him. Exactly like a recent nightmare. "I told you," the guy started, but didn't finish. "Here you can finally rest," the girl said with a smile. "Good night." Jacob did not hide his new sympathy. His answering smile brightened up to his ears. "Sweet dreams, Coco," whispered Jacob. The girl walked off in the opposite direction. It turned out that their huts were located opposite each other. He watched her for a long time. She looked back a few times and got embarrassed. After giving her a glance, Jacob still managed to overcome himself and entered the hut. The place was as simple as the previous dude of grass on the floor. A low, huge tray of unknown purpose and a bamboo curly leg. Jacob lay down on the soft, soulful bed and immediately forgot himself with sleep. And his thoughts again carried to that clearing where he sat just now how much the girl sat motionless, again watching the stars. Jacob cautiously approached her and sat down beside her. That's how they would have sat. But Coco suddenly asked suspiciously, "Why are you lying?" "Lying?" the boy asked incredulously. "It's not her you love. It's me." The girl turned her head to him, but it was no longer Coco, but Anna. "So who do you love?" "Jacob in a sneaky way?" asked the guide. The guy wanted to be here less and less. He broke into a cold sweat, then threw into a fever. "I am your love," or this worthless Coco screamed at the top of Anna's voice, turning into some unknown monster. Jacob was terribly frightened by this. He tried to run away, but his legs turned to stone and wouldn't listen to him. He stayed in one place and tried with all his might to escape from there. "You're not going anywhere," the girl whispered. "Snake." And at that moment her face was so distorted that he cried out in terror and woke up in a sweat, covered with anxious goosebumps. Jacob tried to recover his heavy breathing. This was the ultimate nightmare. He was terribly festering. His head ached terribly. It felt like it was about to split open. Jacob decided to go outside, to breathe. The images from the nightmare finally dissipated, but he still felt all his body unbearable, muscular pain. He was broken, twisted, and tormented. He didn't realize what was happening to him. The village was quiet. It looked like everyone was already asleep, however, in some huts. There was still a weak fire burning. The boy decided to sit on a log by the extinguished fire. From here he could see the stars very well. He was shaking with a small tremor, but still remembered the doll and her glowing eyes. This girl in just a few hours had managed to draw him away so much. He couldn't think of anything but her. Her beautiful blonde hair neatly braided into somewhat intricately their pigtails' bottomless eyes in which you could see the cosmos. The guy realized that he had fallen head over heels in love with that land of polished descent. Could it be that fortune finally turned the right way and he could find his happiness? But Jacob did not like to think ahead and make plans deep into the night. He made the decision to go back to bed and try to sleep, ignoring the pain in his head, which was only getting worse. He went into the cabin, but when he wanted to lie down, he realized that it wasn't his bed at all. There was already a man lying on it. As he got used to the darkness, he realized that this house was much more spacious, and there was more than one bed. Then he began to distinguish someone's silhouettes. Someone had lit a fire. And then Jacob heard a piercing scream. There were women screaming from two sides at once. They all lit their lamps. It was only then that Jacob realized that he had mixed up the huts. There were so many women and girls here, and many were completely leggy. He immediately turned away so as not to embarrass them. "Please excuse me, I seem to have mixed up the huts. I didn't mean to." The guy started to make excuses. Suddenly someone's hand touched him and then pushed him outside. He found himself on the street. Raising his head, Jacob saw Coco. She was covering herself with some sort of cloak. "What are you doing here?" she hissed at him. Exactly like a recent nightmare. "I told you," the guy started, but didn't finish. Something twitched in his right leg. An unbearable pain shot through his body, and he collapsed to the ground. "What's the matter with you?" The girl was frightened. "Stop making a fool of yourself. Get up and go to your hut." But Jacob could not move an arm or a leg. He fell into a kind of paralysis. Every movement gave him terrible pain. Coming to his senses a little, he considered, or rather fumbled for, the huge holes in his hands as he examined them. Coco touched his forehead. "You're burning up," she whispered and dashed off. She had only been gone a minute. But for Jacob, that minute felt like an eternity. His hands were shaking. Every muscle in her body whimpered, her skin ached, and purple spots appeared on her arms. Finally, Coco came back with her. There was some other woman. They took him under their arms and carried him to the opposite hut. His hut he only woke up when they threw him on a bed and rubbed him with cold water. Aya brought her leaves for both the rack and the water. Commanded Coco to her companion, and the herbs we gathered last full moon. While saying this, Coco placed a wet cloth on Jacob's forehead. "What's wrong with me?" Jacob could barely manage to ask. He was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. "You have tropical fever," completely calmly said Coco. It's common here for newcomers. I'll live. It's the fever my mother died of, Coco said mournfully. But I'll do everything I can to make you well. The first few hours are the hardest. You'll be nauseous, achy, twisted, and in general, you'll be in terrible pain. But I know a medicine that will help you, so just bear with me. About 5 minutes passed in silence. Finally, her friend returned with a basket of herbs. They plowed on quite well. However, the last thing that bothered Jacob now was the taste and smell of coca. Taking that basket, she began to throw something into a clay-black pot. Then she stirred that mixture with a spoon. It was getting worse by the second. He was living nonstop. Coco's handmaidens, Aya, kept sighing and looking sympathetically at the guy. Finally, after about 20 minutes, Coco got the medicine mixture she needed. She transferred the contents of the pot into a glass and gave it to Jacob. "Drink," she commanded. Bottoms up. The boy didn't have to be coaxed for long. In 10 seconds, the entire glass was emptied. "Now we just have to wait," Coco said thoughtfully. "Aya, can you go to bed? I'll stay to watch him." "But Coco, our father is uncertain," said Aya. "Our father is already asleep, and you should go." Aya replied Coco stiffly. She obeyed the order and left. Several hours passed. During all this time, Jacob experienced every kind of pain known in the world. First, he had a fever. Then his whole body shook with a terrible cold. He was turned inside out. His brain seemed to explode and boil in his head, and his arms and legs were in such pain as if they were being twisted out of his body without anesthesia. And all the while Coco sat beside him. She didn't move a step away. In her eyes read sincere sympathy. At one point, when Jacob once again began to choke, he asked, addressing himself, not knowing to whom, "Anna, tell me the truth. I'm about to die. I will do everything possible to prevent this from happening." With a sigh, his volunteer nurse replied, "Most likely, you will recover. This decoction will help you. It helps almost everyone. You'll feel better." The girl was right. After several hours of agony just before dawn, Jacob felt much better. The fever had gone down, the cramps had stopped. Of course, the muscles were still aching. However, it was already a tolerable pain. In the morning, the guy fell asleep with the normal sleep of convalescence. Up to this point, as it was with him, he was awakened by a horrible noise that grew louder by the second. The door fell away and a menacing chief came in, shouting something in his own language. Of course, Jacob didn't understand a word of it. The boy had just woken up, and his sleepy mind did not yet understand what was going on. The chief pointed his index finger at Jacob. He was frightened and moved to the wall. 2 muscular natives entered the hut and lifted him from the bed. Jacob tried to resist, but all was unsuccessful. The men dragged him down the street. Dirt and sand stained him all over and all over again like the day before. Jacob was still feeling rather ill. Of course, he was no longer dying like the night before, but his head still split open in pain. The guy was tied to a tall wooden pole. He punctured himself at first, but his body completely, and without 2 lived strong ropes. Only now Jacob realized that he was in the center of the village by the very fire around which the logs were standing. The lad had not noticed this pillar. Yesterday, a lot of people began to gather around it. They all looked at him with anger. "Yesterday, you stranger defamed the honorable names of my wives and daughters," the chieftain said loudly, "and for that you paid with your life." The chief came as close to the boy as he could, hooked his cane in Jacob's chest, and almost whispered said in English, "We were kind to you, and you turned out to be a snake." After these words, the man turned around and walked away. The others followed his example. Jacob was left alone with himself. The young man looked around. On one of the neighboring poles hung the skeleton of a man. The boy was horrified. Did he really get into the lair of the ogres? God, how many things can happen to a man in 2 days? And what's he in for? Why? He began to mentally feel sorry for himself and fell into a real despair. He was well aware that the chances of rescue were now slim to none. But why had they done this to him? To this question he had no intelligible answer. The mutterings of the chief did not count. Where's Coco? Why hadn't she come to his aid? He was beginning to get a bad headache again, and thirsty on top of it. The sun was at the very horizon, and it was scorching and so splitting his head. It was probably around noon by now. Jacob could feel the sweat running down his body and covering his eyes. His itching and muscle aches started again. It was a terrible torment, for the guy couldn't move a single muscle. The only thing he cared about was where Coco had gone. There were a lot of related questions. Had she abandoned him in such a dire situation? Why had she saved his life yesterday if she realized that in the morning he would be tied to the damn pole? There were no answers, of course, and the thirst tormented him more and more. So did the flies and blinders that periodically landed on his fleshy body and bit the unfortunate man. Soon the sufferer's lips were shooting and burning as if on fire. He badly needed water, plain water, please. But when people passed by the pole to his cries for help, no one paid the slightest attention, and certainly no one rushed to bring him water. On the contrary, they stopped, pointed their fingers at him and laughed. Surely the leader must have let them know that this foreigner was a horrible person who didn't deserve to live. Possessing a well-developed sense of humor, the guy even laughed at his stupid death. He could have drowned on the boat, could have died in the jaws of a crocodile, or just lost forever in the jungle, could have suffered from the deadly embrace of a gorilla. He could have died of tropical fever, but instead he's hanging. Now on that damn pole like a Christian martyr. Yes, Mrs. Fortune was clearly not on his side. After some more time, Jacob began to lose consciousness. Weak from the recent fever, exhausted by the past events and the hot sun, deprived of the ability to move, suffering from thirst, he fell more and more often, either into sleep or into delirium. In rare intervals of consciousness, the boy realized where he was and realized that he had not long to suffer. Without water, he would last another couple of hours at most. But suddenly, Jacob saw with the corner of his eye Aya passing by. She was carrying 2 buckets of water, and she was clearly struggling. The guy tried to shout to her, but from behind your voice came out only pitifully and squeak. The girl turned around. In her eyes read sympathy. However, she could not do anything and was about to leave. But Jacob tried to stop her, gathering all his last strength. Aya, simple young man. The girl looked around suspiciously. There was no one on the street. Then she cautiously approached the pole on which the guy was hanging. Please give me some water, Jacob asked. Aya looked around again to make sure no one was following her. She picked up some sort of dirty clay vessel, lying in the dust. Someone must have left it here a long time ago and splashed water from a bucket into it, brought the vessel to Jacob's lips, and the boy greedily took a sip of water. Now this liquid seemed to him the most delicious in the world. Jacob drank the entire vessel in a matter of seconds. He did not even have time to thank Aya. She immediately ran away. Probably she would be very hurt too, if the people of the tribe found out that she had helped their nephew. Jacob was feeling much better now. The sun wasn't so scorching anymore. The case drew closer to evening, but the fever continued to torment the lad. It seemed that the potion Coco had given him was only effective for a certain amount of time. He realized that his new fate was no better than his old one. He was dying again, only now not from the thirst of a tropical disease. Jacob remembered his parents, his cousin, and cried. Now he will never see them again. He was lucky to get here in this damn jungle. Why did he have to go on this vile journey? If he just stayed home, everything would have been all right. Night fell. The boy had already begun to pray to all known gods for death. His head split open his muscles. His body was cramping, and his arms and legs were covered with holes. When will this hell end? Screamed the boy in despair. He screamed and howled like a wild animal, but no one even came near him. At some point, coming to my senses from forgetting, I discovered that it was already night. The moon was shining very brightly. The silence, breaking mine, only by the rare cries of forest creatures drove me crazy. Jacob moaned quietly in pain. Suddenly, the young man heard some kind of crunch. At first, it seemed to him in a painful delirium that this terrible monster was coming to devour him. But in a few minutes, Coco appeared at the pillar. She looked very depressed and tired. The girl stopped near the unfortunate prisoner and looked at him sadly. Coco, you are. You have come for me. You will save me. Gasping with joy wheezed Jacob, but she gave him a judgmental look. Shut up, she whispered. The boy immediately shut his mouth. Now he really hoped no one had heard his joyful wheezes. Coco walked over to the pole and began to tie the ropes one by one. Jacob's legs came free first, then his arms as well. Freed from the restraints, he collapsed to the ground, limbs so used up that they simply refused to work. Poetry after me, whispered the girl. The boy did not hesitate. He strained all his will and crawled after his savior nice. So they passed several huts, trying to keep in the darkest places. Suddenly, a man appeared in the distance. The girl pushed the boy with her foot, pushing him into some dark prologue between the two wives. She herself, too, dived in after him. They lurched, trying not even to breathe. A man in hunting clothes walked past them. On his back hung the bow, and in his hands he carried the carcass of a rather large animal. Fortunately, he was so happy with his prey that he paid no attention to the couple. When the man finally disappeared, Coco peered around the corner to survey the situation. No one was there. Let's go in a whisper, she said. Finally, they left the village and came to a large clearing. It was similar to the one he had sat on the night before last, looking up at the stars. There was more brush and no water nearby. It was probably the most common of the jungle. Jacob was weak and shaking with sickness and fear. Here he was also very uneasy. Suddenly, the village would discover the missing and give chase. But the young man hoped that Coco knew what he was doing. Suddenly, something very strange happened. The girl clapped her hands, made an incomprehensible guttural sound, and then stomped 3 times on the ground. What are you doing? Jacob was indignant. We're about to be heard. But the girl paid no attention to his protests and continued the same actions. 2 claps, a strange sound, stomping feet. 2 claps, stomping feet. 2 claps, stomping feet. After a while, horrifying sounds were heard. Jacob realized that some large animal was running straight at them. He folded himself with fright. Again he thought that his death had come. His exhausted mind refused to think straight. He was about to run. He jerked. But what stopped him? Jacob just trusted me, softly said the girl. Soothingly, and the tone in which she said those words worked on Jacob. He stopped and followed the girl's example. She waited. There was confidence in her gaze. Finally, someone Jacob did not expect to see came into the clearing. It was the same gorilla that had brought him to the village the day before yesterday. Or maybe it was another one. The hell of it. Hello, Bamboo, gently said Coco, stroking low forehead of the animal. The huge beast bowed obediently to her as if she were its queen. The feeling between them was barely perceptible to outsiders. A strong bond was burning, clearly very attached to this girl. Just like I thought Jacob was. Do you know him? Surprised asked the young man. The girl tore her gaze away from the animal and turned to Jacob. Yes, this is my best friend, Bamboo. We've known each other since childhood. Coco smiled. Come, I'll tell the story. On the way, she said something quietly to Bamboo, and he easily, like a feather, picked up Jacob and put him on his powerful shoulders. Now we're going to be walking for a long time, Coco said businesslike. Try not to faint. Here, drink this, it will give you strength. She held out to him a vessel made of a noisy, unknown Jacob at a large plant fruit. Drink it, almost commanded Coco. Jacob took a sip of the liquid contents of the vessel. It turned out to be quite pleasant to the taste, gave off herbs and as if honey. However, now he would drink anything to hold out and survive. By the way, to what limit would he have to hold out? He must have asked that question out loud, because Coco answered him we're heading for the coast. Hold on, darling. She told him the story of how she had once met her furry friend in this jungle. Then, in his half-delirium, the boy could only catch bits and pieces of it. But then, a few years later, he remembered everything he had heard on that distant, almost fantastical night, and wrote it down to preserve it forever. Coco, let's go, shouted Aya, putting on her bow. We won't catch any animals because of you. Doll is in her leather hunting bag. I can't find the bracelet. Sadly, she said. You will. Then we'll go already. You don't understand, it's Mom's bracelet. It brought her luck. I never go hunting without it. Coco, if we don't go into the woods right now, my father will make bags out of us instead of crocodile. Coco sighed and walked out of the hut. Her sister was completely right. We can still live without the bracelet, but not without clothes and food. Okay, let's have a bow already, asked someone handed her a weapon, and the girls went into the forest. Father said to pick more berries, so the animals today will not touch almost, said Aya doll only nodded. Her mood was very spoiled by the missing bracelet. It was the only thing she had gotten from her mother after she was gone. Everything had changed. It was how he had started living on his own. Now there was no longer a person to answer for her actions. 2 hours passed. The girls picked a lot of berries and loaded them into special cloth bags that were fastened around their necks. It was very convenient to walk with them on the mountainous terrain. They were already walking a few miles away from the village and suddenly heard a terrible cry. Aya got into a fighting stance and prepared her bow. Someone's coming at us. Get ready to shoot. Aya whispered loudly to her sister. They had already drawn their arrows. And as soon as the predator appeared on the horizon, they fired. Then it became clear that it was a gorilla, and it was advancing towards them at a great leap. But its wounds were mortal, and its strength was running out. At last, the mortally wounded beast collapsed. The girls gingerly approached it and examined it. The gorilla was not yet dead. It was sighing heavily. Careful noticed an oddity in its behavior. The gorilla was hiding something in its furry paws. Examining the body more closely, the girls saw deep wounds. Clearly not shot. They looked like bites. Aya, come here. She called out to her sister. She walked over to Coco. These are teeth marks. Aya said thoughtfully, it looks like this gorilla was attacked. And at that moment, they heard a terrible growl. They turned around and saw a huge female leopard behind them. Aya immediately started shooting at the animal. Doll grabbed her spear. The wounded leopard lunged at Aya. And as soon as it did, Doll deftly impaled the beast with the sharp spear. When the girls had recovered from the shock, Coco made a stunning conclusion. So this gorilla didn't mean to attack us. It was fleeing. Suddenly, the sisters heard a thin cry. At first, they didn't realize where it was coming from. It was somewhere very close by. Then they realized that the sounds came from the gorilla, or rather from what it was holding in its paws. The girls looked at each other. Coco cautiously approached the animal with force, pulled her limbs apart, and pulled out a cub quite small. "Oh my God," was all Aya could utter as Coco held the creature and cried. The mother had saved him from the leopard, and we had killed her. There was silence. No one could say a word. What have we done? Broke the sepulchral silence. I'll never forgive myself for this. Coco, we didn't know. I'll take him with me, the girl suddenly declared. Aya looked at her in surprise. What are you talking about? She was indignant. Father won't allow you to keep him in the village. It could become dangerous when it grows up. It's a wild animal, Coco. I killed his mother, and now I have to take care of him. Didn't they teach you to help our lesser brothers? I don't know what you were taught, where you were born. But this is not our brother here. He'll grow up to be an animal as dangerous as his mother, and then destroy the whole village. I won't let you take him with you. Let's see what Father has to say about that. Coco said decisively and put the baby in her sinus. When they arrived at the village, they were already greeted by a crowd of people. The sisters had not been gone long enough, for the villagers were already starting to worry. Where have you been? Formidably asked the chief. Aya stepped forward and told them what had happened, but did not mention the fact that they had found a baby gorilla. I am very sorry to hear that, stated the chief, but I am glad you are alive. Take the berries you have picked, and you are free to go. The girls nodded affirmatively and walked towards the general supply depot. I didn't turn you in, Aya said as they laid out the berries. But if you don't confess to your father, I'll tell everything myself. So do it as soon as you can. Otherwise, it will be worse. You're a great sister, Aya replied Coco sarcastically. You're not my sister, and you never will be. Aya said and walked away. Coco almost cried at those words. It had been 10 years since her mother had been gone, and there had not been a day when she had not thought of her. It had been very hard for her. No one really understood her here, and no one would ever really love her. She's not like them. It's been a week since Coco got her pet. The girl named him Bomb. It was an unusual and made-up name by her. She fed the ox with his literal milk. He got stronger and got a little bigger. Now, I didn't communicate with Coco at all, but she didn't miss a chance to remind me that soon all secret things will be revealed. But Coco ignored her and continued to raise the poor baby. One day, the chief burst into her hut and ordered her to immediately take the gorilla to the jungle where it belonged. And Coco was severely punished. She wasn't supposed to leave the village for a week, but that didn't stop her. And on her first night, she went in search of her pet. The Bomb, she screamed. Coco had traveled quite a distance, but still hadn't found the cub. But then she heard a sound like a baby crying again. She followed that sound and came to a small ravine. These barbarians had thrown him in where he couldn't get out on his own. He was like a small bear cub trying to climb the walls and charge, but the ground only crumbled under his weight. The nimble Coco immediately got the poor little fellow out and gave him a drink of the ample milk she had brought with her. She was sure she would find him. Her hopes were realized. She left him in a secluded cave, the entrance to which she closed with a large heavy stone, and has visited every night since. So the Bomb rose before her eyes. After a while, when the baby became active enough, she began to train him. He hit on a whistle and came on a special command. The girl clapped her hands and then drowned dolls, became a real foster mother to him. As Jacob listened to this marvelous story to the end, he yawned. He yawned, closed in the thick fur, gorilla, and said, "What a rat yours is, Aya." Doll grinned and replied, "By the way, she was the one who told the chief about you climbing into our hut." The boy's eyes rounded. He was already wishing for this most horrible death. I mean, come to think of it, even the natives have such bitches. After a while, Jacob no longer remembered how and when they finally reached the coast. At the beginning of this strange journey, Jacob still tried to perceive something, but then completely shut down. The sickness of the experience, the nightmare and the terrible pain finally overcame him. Meanwhile, Coco and Boing had finally reached the publicized tourist beach. The beach was at its most deafening pre-dawn an hour. And of course, no one was here right now. Then the girl gathered dry leaves of twigs and set them on fire with matches she found among Jacob's things. It seemed that when the flames flared up, Jacob instantly regained consciousness. He remembered bright flashes, but he had no strength at all. The last thing the boy heard and remembered were the words "cuckoo," "hold on, my love," or was he just imagining it? In a feverish delirium, she left Jacob on the beach next to a brightly burning fire, and together with the Bomb disappeared into the jungle. A few minutes later, one of the hotel guards noticed the flames and came to see what hooligans had set it up, but saw only poor half-dead Jacob, who knew from tropical fever. The man who found him screamed in terror and immediately called for help. Other people came running. After that, Jacob passed out again. Finally, he came to himself. Only a few days later found himself lying on a narrow couch. Every muscle in his body aching, and in his head is a mess. True, the head itself no longer split open from the pain, and the hole in his arms disappeared as if they had never existed. He looked around the room. His bunk was behind a curtain of semi-transparent white curtains, and it was quite clean. There were various medical devices and medicines. There were voices, moans, and even screams coming from somewhere. Jacob realized that he was in the local hospital. Here and there behind the curtains were heard lively conversations, mumbling, snoring, or long prayers in an incomprehensible language. There were long plastic tubes reaching out to him, and the young man was afraid to touch them. After a few minutes, the curtains were pulled back by the doctor. Jacob said dark hair and a man in white. "Yes," replied the boy uncertainly. "How do they know my name?" He thought, "I'm glad you're finally awake." The doctor continued in Polish. "My name is Alex. I studied in your country and know a little of the language. Your story has intrigued the whole hospital, I must say. You have tropical fever, quite common amongst newcomers to our area. Why didn't you get vaccinated before coming here?" Jacob only shrugged his shoulders. He never trusted unfamiliar inoculations, and what if it would only make things worse? I hope you'll tell us how you ended up in the jungle and how you managed to survive there for almost a whole week. I don't remember, weakly answered Jacob. How did I get here? He looked fearfully at the doctor. They're not after me. You were found on the hotel beach, the doctor said. You were immediately hospitalized here at our clinic. You were delirious for days. It took us a long time to find out who you were and where you were from. We checked with the police. Finally, a woman named Anna got in touch. She was your guide on a tour group. They've been looking for you all over the department for days, but that's for later. Right now, I need to assess your condition. The doctor examined the patient's ears, throat, nose, eyes, listened to his heart and breathing, counted his pulse, measured his blood pressure. Then he moved on to his legs and arms. The guy still wasn't fully oriented in his memories and started asking questions. Tell me, where's Coco? She came here with me. I mean, did I come with her or did I come? Rode in on such a huge beast. I'm sorry. The doctor was surprised. The girl from the village. His annoyance, Jacob wrinkled his nose, seeing that he was not understood. She saved me from those awful natives. You know, they tied me to a pole and she brought me to the beach. Well, not her, but her gorilla. What was her bomb then? The doctor touched the patient's forehead. There seems to be no heat. He said thoughtfully, perhaps you should rest some more. This disease is really very difficult. You do not believe me. Jacob was offended. Like a little doctor smiled, rest, gain strength. Soon the police will come to you. And this girl is your tour guide, Anna. Anna. Jacob could not believe that he had already forgotten this girl. Now there was only one Coco in his heart. He had really fallen in love with her. She had saved his life 3 times. Imagine that. Although maybe he was just dreaming. Suddenly there was no village and it was all in his mind. In a feverish delirium, Aboriginal tribe, reasonable gorilla, crocodiles, fierce chiefs, execution on a pole, naked girls in a hut, and starry night no, cannot be such. Had the girl of his dreams turned out to be only a barren image? But he was simply not allowed to think about it properly. What was it again? Behind her was Anna, Jacob. My God, how happy I am that you are alive, she exclaimed. We've all been looking for you for days. Didn't sleep at night. She even wept and hugged him. When she saw the haggard, thinning face of her ward, you probably didn't even eat. I'm fine. Been sick with tropical fever all these days. I'm so sorry, Jacob. Please forgive me. Please don't report me to the police. Anna was crying. The guy was in some kind of trance and still did not really understand what was happening. Anna, surprised, exclaimed to the young man, Is it really you? I am, of course I am. God, how wonderful that you finally found. Jacob assumed a semi-upright position on his bunk. Anna quietly and seriously began, Jacob. I want to tell you something, and please listen to me to the end. The girl was wary. I'm listening, and Jacob began to tell from the beginning. For some reason, when he met Anna, his mind was clear. He told her everything from the moment he ran after the parrot to the torture when he almost died on the pole. Anna's eyes visibly rounded after this story. She obviously thought that the guy was still delusional. Jacob, I do not want to offend you, but cautiously said the girl. But this disease, which you suffer from such clinical manifestations. The doctor said I know. You all think I'm crazy? He turned his back to the wall and fell silent. Jacob did not believe anything anymore, not the doctor, not even himself. The reactions of the doctor and his guide sowed in him not eliminated and doubts about the plausibility of the story. But think about it, Anna told him, trying to make sense of what kind of wild gorilla could carry a man through the rainforest to the coast. Why would it do that? How would you be able to understand the language of the natives? It's unlikely that Descartes memorized Polish, that well if she was only 5 years old when she and her mother crashed. Besides, there are no natives of their tribes here for hundreds of kilometers around at all. All these statements and questions affected Jacob very much. Anna still managed to assure him that it was all just a game of his sick imagination. Listen, Jacob, said the girl, I realize now it is silly to assume such a thing in your condition. However, I will do it. Would you like to go out with me? After you're fully recovered, of course. Maybe we'll still have time before we leave for a date? Jacob smiled, not believing his luck. How much he wanted to get closer to this wonderful girl. And then it was as if he woke up from the anesthesia and even switched to you. Although it was rude. Wait, so you have Jim, right? Jim, he's in the past, Anna said firmly. In the past. I don't want anything to do with him anymore. You know, he cheated on me. Anna turned away and brushed tears from her eyes. There was an awkward silence. Jacob was digesting this information while Anna tried to calm her emotions. I'm sorry, only Jacob could only give out a tear rolled down Anna's cheek. Do you need to rest? She realized. I'll come back later. After her departure, Jacob's head was torn apart again, but no longer from pain, but from the confusion and complexity of the circumstances. He liked Anna very much, until he met Coco, but as they had already found out, no Coco had ever existed. The doctor came to see him again, and said that tomorrow morning they would be able to discharge him. Then a policeman came and spent a long time tediously writing some papers near his bed, asking various stupid questions together with a shoddy interpreter. Finally, it was time for bedtime and the exhausted patient. Finally, he was able to rest. The next morning, he was already standing at the front desk waiting for his discharge. He couldn't wait to go back to the hotel, change into clean clothes, wash himself properly, and leave this crazy country forever. Can you give me the document that the doctor gave you? Asked the girl behind the counter. Yes, now smiled the young man. He started in the pockets of his shorts, suddenly realized. Where's my camera? It was as if he had been hit with a gush of cold water. Had he lost such a precious and important thing in this damn jungle? Isn't that what you're looking for? The registrar girl asked him and pulled out his precious photos from somewhere. In the inventory it says that this bag was found with you on the beach. Anna informed him with a dazzling smile. Jacob frantically grabbed the camera, opened the monitor, and almost collapsed on the floor when he saw the photo. It was Coco, a real live Coco. And next thing you know, there they were, sitting on the grass together. Behind them are dark tropical trees, and above them, that magical starry sky. Jacob whistled. These pictures were sure proof that this whole story was real. He had neither dreamed it nor dreamed it. He wanted to shout and jump with happiness, but everyone would think he was crazy. What can I say? Nobody. No one believed his delusional stories. As soon as he was discharged, Jacob ran out of the hospital in full confidence that he would find his love. I will find her, the guy said to himself, and walked out of the clinic. Jacob towards him, smiling dazzlingly, got out of the parked car. Anna, I've come for you. She informed him. She hugged him and kissed him on the cheek. He was dumbfounded by such a sudden appearance and behavior, also slightly embraced her. They got into the car and drove to the hotel. All the way he looked at his photos and came to the conclusion that they were truly magnificent. All the hotel staff and tourists gathered at the entrance to greet the traveler who had returned from the other side of the world. Anna, looking at this joyful meeting, she couldn't hide her tears. She didn't expect to see this handsome guy alive. In addition, she was very afraid that he would report to the police about inadmissible negligence on her part and demand compensation for the harm done to his life and health, personally from her as a responsible person and from the travel agency. That's why she went to the hospital. That's why she offered him a date. She saw the way he looked at her the first day he arrived. She'd seen the way he'd fallen in love with her slender legs and other charms. But Jacob, carried away by his feelings and memories, did not even think about all this. The hotel staff was also very happy about the return of the missing guest. Everyone tried to do him something nice. The administration threw a fancy dinner with alcoholic drinks for the whole group. They were also partly to blame for the missing tourist. After all, it was the hotel that provided the jungle travelers with such flimsy trackers. Jacob tried to find out from the hotel staff where the Aboriginal settlement was located, but they only shrugged their shoulders. Either they really did not know the location of the village, or Jacob spoke English so badly In any case, even after a couple of days, he still could not get anything from them. "Val, how are you?" asked him. Anna sat down at his table at dinner. "I'm great," thoughtfully answered the guy, taking another sip of wine. "And how are you? What about Jim?" "My lawyer is preparing the divorce papers for now." The girl frowned. This was clearly not what she wanted from her conversation with Jacob. "Have you thought about my proposal?" The guy was silent for a long time, looked at one point, and then woke up, and with the proposal to walk, to get better acquainted. Anna reminded me. She seemed very uncomfortable with this conversation. "I'm sorry, I don't think now is the time. I haven't quite recovered yet. You can see how absent-minded I am." He smiled guiltily at her. "It's okay, no problem." Anna smiled, and fled as quickly as possible. Jacob didn't care at all. He was only thinking about Coco and where he could find her. The young man decided to go where he came from, to the port. That was where it was full of different merchants. They surely had to know where the natives lived. Getting out of bed early in the morning, he went to the cab he had ordered the night before. The night before, he had arranged with a man to take him to the harbor. But the man was not there now. "Who are you looking for?" asked Anna, passing by. "Yes," stammered Jacob. The cab driver didn't see. So he left on an excursion to the mountains. It is worth telling here that as soon as it became known about the missing tourist in Anna's group, she was immediately fired from her job. However, she was forced to stay here until the general departure. Shortly afterward, she learned of her husband's infidelity. All this broke her down. The only escape from her moping was Jacob. There was something about that guy, but he turned his back on her too. That's when she decided to win him over herself. To do this, she discouraged the driver to go with Jacob, saying that he was sick. And now she planned to take the driver's seat herself. "It's just that we made a deal with him yesterday. He didn't say anything about a tour," Jacob explained. "Let me take you where you need to go." Anna offered with a smile. "I have the keys, from where they gave them. Even when I was a tour guide, I will leave. They will take away." Jacob did not understand her game and agreed. They fairly quickly rushed to the pier. Here the guy thanked his companion and asked to leave him alone. Anna was greatly disappointed by this, but he did not even pay any attention to her mood and went in search of information about his beloved. At the harbor, a local boy was also mistaken. Apparently the same age as Jacob himself, he was selling various national souvenirs from a trade to tourists. "Hey, Frente," I said hello to him. Jacob in English. "Do you know where to be a village of local people?" "Village people. There's a village guy," cheerfully answered the merchant and waved his hand. "No, you do not understand me. People and other people," tried to explain Jacob. "Other people." "No, I do not. Guy buy goods, here spoons, mugs take." "No thanks," frustrated, muttered Jacob, and headed to the next vendor, bearded a man with a red cape on his shoulders. "I have only the finest quality fabrics." This bearded man beckoned to the customers. Jacob approached him under the guise of an ordinary customer. "Hello," greeted the merchant. "What do you want, dear?" "You help me village to the jungle. Where is the village?" "I do not understand you," said the man already without any enthusiasm, "but you know the village." "1 second. Jacob pulled out of his pants pocket the very picture. "How much to know this girl?" "No, that's your fancy. Beautiful." "I hope so," Jacob thought to himself. "Are you looking for a village in the jungle?" suddenly asked someone's voice from behind. Jacob turned around to look at him. A swarthy, low-statured man. "He didn't say anything about a tour," Jacob explained. "Let me take you where you need to go." Anna offered with a smile. "I have the keys, from where they gave them. Even when I was a tour guide, I will leave. They will take away." Jacob did not understand her game and agreed. They fairly quickly rushed to the pier. Here the guy thanked his companion and asked to leave him alone. Anna was greatly disappointed by this, but he did not even pay any attention to her mood and went in search of information about his beloved. At the harbor, a local boy was also mistaken. Apparently the same age as Jacob himself, he was selling various national souvenirs from a trade to tourists. "Hey, Frente," I said hello to him. Jacob in English. Do you know where to be a village of local people? Village people. There's a village guy, cheerfully answered the merchant and waved his hand. No, you do not understand me, people and other people tried to explain Jacob other people. No, I do not. Guy buy goods, here spoons, mugs take. No thanks, frustrated, muttered Jacob, and headed to the next vendor, bearded a man with a red cape on his shoulders. I have only the finest quality fabrics. This bearded man beckoned to the customers. Jacob approached him under the guise of an ordinary customer. Hello, greeted the merchant. What do you want, dear? You help me village to the jungle. Where is the village? I do not understand you, said the man already without any enthusiasm, but you know the village. 1 second. Jacob pulled out of his pants pocket the very picture. How much to know this girl? No, that's your fancy, beautiful. I hope so, Jacob thought to himself. Are you looking for a village in the jungle? Suddenly asked someone's voice from behind. Jacob turned around to look at him. A swarthy, low-statured man was watching. Do you want to find the village of the people? He repeated his question. Yes, almost jumping for joy, shouted the boy. Come with me. Jacob gladly obeyed. They walked through the entire makeshift market and came out to a dilapidated wooden house. Immediately he shouted to them around it were a yard of stroller legs that tourists rode on. The teenagers in the 10th tree were sitting and playing cards with several men of obviously gangster appearance. All of them were swarthy. There they confirmed to him that they would give him 100,000 even as collateral. The satisfied bandit gave his consent. He and Jacob took the camera to the pawn shop. Each received 50,000 and the owner gave them a receipt. Jacob left the other half of the amount with the pawn shop owner in the safe. If I come back alive, I will give you everything as agreed, the guy told his escort. If we can take the girl with us, you will also get the camera, and that's another 500,000 for your money. Now all that was left to do was to wait until morning, because that's when the small group decided to move out. They met at the same place at the earliest possible hour. All were dressed appropriately for the occasion. Everyone had a weapon, and Jacob was glad of it. In the jungle, it was really necessary. After all, not only wild animals lived there, but also wild people. Now with such a team, Jacob was not scary neither snakes, nor gorillas, nor crazy chiefs. On their way, they met poisonous cobras, huge spiders, and even a tiger. But all these animals bypassed them. No battle was fought, no horrors happened. Jacob decided it was a good omen. We were almost there, and the guy pronounced the muscular bandit. Toward evening, when tired from the long walk, Jacob was ready to fall over nothing and never move again. But I don't think you'll be so welcome in this village. He grinned. I looked at Jacob and saw familiar places. The same clearing where they had sat with the doll, gazing at the stars. And there was the familiar village. It was still quite light, so a lot of people came out to see what kind of strangers came to their territory. At their head, of course, was the old chief. He gave Jacob a scornful look. Why have you come to us? You rascal again, growled the chief. The guide immediately translated these words for the customer into Polish. Tell him I have come for cocoa, said Jacob. The boy wants to talk to your daughter, the interpreter said. Jacob himself caught the old chief's menacing and judgmental gaze. No, Coco's father cut him off. The men had foreseen this option and pointed their pistols in the direction of the gathered tribe. It saw the girl. The leader commanded about the counselors. The chief made a terrible grimace and shook his staff. All the male savages immediately thrust forward their spears and looked very belligerent. The chief began to prepare something in his own language, and so quickly that even the interpreter could not keep track of his curses and swear words. He didn't need to. He raised his pistol and shot into the air more quickly. There were screams of shrieking women, children, armed with spears and bows. The crowd drew these theses and prepared to shoot at the uninvited guests. Suddenly, from behind their backs, Coco sprang forward. She was amazed and angered by the reappearance of Jacob. She ran up to the chief and quickly said something to him, gesticulating desperately. The chief nodded and made a sign to his men. Put down your weapons. Let's go. Doll grabbed Jacob by the arm and pulled him to the side. What the hell are you doing here, forget you? Jacob replied in a gentle voice and smiled stupidly. All the colors of light and the words he had prepared for this meeting just slipped out of his head. He missed this girl so much. As soon as he saw her, he drowned in those stray eyes of Coco's. I want to take you away from here, he blurted out. You don't belong here. That's how she made an impenetrable face and straightened proudly. And why do I want you to be my begging wife, said the lad. I will take you away with me to my homeland. These people, these savages. Do you really want to live your whole life like this? She lowered her eyes and was silent for a minute. The villagers and the chief himself watched the whole scene, but they did not understand a single word of the lovers' conversation. Finally, Coco raised her gaze to Jacob again. Jacob, you're a very nice guy, and I really like you. But I can't do this. My family's here now, a family that doesn't respect you, that kills people. Just like that. It's nothing like that. Coco objected. You don't know anything about our lives. You think just because you've been here a couple days you're an expert. She grinned. All families have their skeletons in the closet. But I'm not leaving here ever. These people sheltered my mom and me when we were almost dying from our wounds, hunger, and thirst. She often told me how cruelly my own father had treated her, how she had suffered in that distant cold country. She and I were flying to visit distant relatives, and she bought those tickets with her last money because we had nowhere else to go. But it's a very long story, and you don't need it. Coco cut herself off. All you need to know is this. This is where my mom and I found love, care, found a real family. This is her grave. Besides, here is my Bon, my boy, whom I raised as my own son. You intend to take him with you too? She asked ironically. Jacob was suppressively silent. I can never leave this place, she said firmly. And to be honest, you acted like the ultimate idiot. If you'd stuck to the rules, none of this would have happened. You were welcomed as a guest, and you violated our laws of hospitality, Coco. What are you talking about? Stunned spoke Jacob. Wake up. Come with me. I beg you. Let's go away from these filthy savages who stuffed your pretty head with all kinds of nonsense. You're a Russian girl. I'll take you home. You don't belong here, please. This is where I belong, she declared, glaring angrily. I'll be a stranger there, and you'll be the first to reject me. Did my mom tell me how conniving men can be? She added, and her lips quivered. I saw you with her. Suddenly she added and turned away, looking like a hurt child. Who was Jacob's apex with? With that gorgeous hottie outside the hospital. I saw you being taken away and followed. Where did she put you? Said Coco quietly that morning when you left the hospital. She kissed you and you hugged her and laughed. You've got it all wrong. Coco tried to change her mind to Jacob. Anna and I are just friends. She's my guide, and she's married. Finally, he found himself and gave out this argument, hoping that it will sober up the jealous Coco. Married. She was amazed. Mom was right. In your horrible country, all people are promiscuous and lustful scoundrels. Yes, in our country, a married woman doesn't even dare to go near another man. And you? How dare you embrace her when you know she has a husband? Go away. I don't even want to know you, she sang, like a snake, and spit at his feet. Jacob was completely confused. He looked at the girl for a long time and could not understand whether she was making a show in front of her father or telling the truth. But Coco's look testified that all this was said in earnest. She does not understand another life, will not leave her tribe or her mother's grave. A terrible blow to the young man's very heart. But it was her choice, and he had no right to judge her. He sighed heavily, turned and made a sign to his mercenaries. Let's go. Goodbye, Coco. Sadly, he said to his beloved, standing already beside the leader. For the last time, he plunged into her bottomless eyes. It was less than 24 hours before the departure of the cruise liner. Jacob lay in his hotel room, unable to find a place to sleep. He thought only of her hair, her lips, her eyes. He wanted to see again, even for a brief moment, this mysterious girl who had been through so much. If she wasn't going to be with him, then why was she helping him? Why had she saved his life? Perhaps he would never be able to understand her choices. God, why is everything so complicated in this life? Jacob took his camera and dialed a familiar number. "Hello," answered a thin girl's voice. "Anya, would you like to come with me to this last dinner?" "Yes, okay. I'll be right back to pick you up." He ended the call, shook his head, looked at himself in the mirror, and with a determined step, walked out of the room towards his destiny. Quite a few years had passed since then. Jacob left his boring office. He graduated from a specialized college, then university, and became quite famous and well-paid photojournalist. In achieving this goal, he was greatly helped by the very photo he took in the distant tropical jungle, and of course, his parents who always supported their son in everything. "Honey, I made you breakfast." The gentle voice of his wife reached here and from the kitchen. Jacob yawned once more and got out of bed. It had been a long time since he had lived with his parents. Now he had a beautiful modern apartment in a new building. Pulling up, Jacob entered the kitchen. On the high chair sat his 1-year-old son Arseny. He was already eating his morning porridge. Of course, he was not particularly good at it, but his loving mother helped him in everything. "Sit down, Jacob. Cheesecakes already. And here you go." On the table appeared a large dish, full of appetizing golden. Krugliakov Jacob picked up a couple, put to his plate. "Very tasty, my dear." What did he throw his wife in the cheek? "How'd you sleep? You came back to work so late last night. What do you want?" The man shrugged. He sipped the coffee his wife had carefully brewed in the large kitchen. As always, the TV was on in the background, of course, on the news channel. Suddenly, Jacob saw vaguely familiar terrain on the screen and turned up the volume. Cautiously, he said, "Leaving the cup 3 hours ago, a terrible tsunami had struck the coast and nearby areas of Central and West Africa." Commented on the terrifying footage. Announcer. Severely affected the territory of Cameroon. Many settlements, tourist complexes, and other objects of infrastructure will be washed off the face of the earth. In addition, a large mudslide came down from the mountains near the village of Buda. The footage kept flashing on the screen. The disaster-stricken area, familiar to both of them, looked terrible. And what was happening there now looked more like an apocalyptic movie than anything else. "Jesus," that's what the shocked Anna said, and sat down on a chair, staring at the TV screen. Jacob's cell phone vibrated in his pocket. The head of the newsroom was calling. "Saw the broadcast," he shouted. "Immediately we load everything and leave for the site. The whole group should be ready in half an hour tops." At 12, he booked the flight. Jacob was not used to such situations. An alarming backpack was always waiting in the check room. His wife had long since accepted this schedule of her husband and did not ask unnecessary questions. After 15 minutes, Jacob fully equipped, fully kissed goodbye to his wife and son and quickly walked out of the apartment. On the spot, the film crew arrived without much incident. Fortunately, the nearest convenient airport was not affected by the rampant elements. At the ramp, they were already waiting for a special vehicle that could take the correspondents to the border with the danger zone. Further, they flew by helicopter, flying over the very places where in his youth he had experienced so many exciting and tragic events. The man involuntarily gave himself over to the memories. They were flying over the very epicenter of the disaster. Piles of garbage and all sorts of debris that had once been neat houses, hotels, shopping centers, and hospitals were mixed with earth, trees, and dirty water. Rescue efforts unfolded all around. Poor survivors wept over the bodies of loved ones. The once beautiful coastline no longer existed. The crew took many good photos and recorded a great report from the scene. The company management will be pleased with the sudden anger, Jacob thought. He hated this part of his job with all his soul, having to do business on someone else's misfortune. Besides, it wasn't the lame thoughts that haunted him, it was Coco. How long had it been? He hadn't thought of her. And her village wasn't that far from here either, folks. "We urgently need to get up into the jungle," he announced to his colleagues. "What's that for?" The leader of this expedition was indignant. "Our work is almost done. There we will make stunning footage." Jacob didn't stop. "I know what I'm saying. I was once long ago of these places. Here in these mountains still exists completely secluded, and a village of natives may still exist," he added, mentally with sorrow. That's not where you took that crazy picture you got paid so much money for. The coworker perked up. Jacob nodded silently with a bow, commanded his boss, and began to rush the employees. We need to get to the Dan village before dark. The jungle was also very badly damaged. Here and there you could see huge trees uprooted, huge layers of soil, giant rocks. Forest fires were raging all around. Jacob was struggling to gaze at the terrain and trying to check the map steer. Shouted he finally into the speaker of his helmet. Going down. The small creek was now out of its banks and looked like a real stormy stream. From far away from the Aboriginal camp came loud cries, groans, wounded, and mooing of frightened animals. With difficulty finding a place to land. An experienced pilot managed to land the helicopter here. Correspondents rushed to the scene in droves. Jacob was not filming anything. His face was focused and frowning. All around was the same as on the coast. The rubble, the debris, the dead bodies had oriented themselves a bit. He hurried to where he thought the posts around the fire had once stood. The vivid earlier memories had already been erased, and his panic fear of this place was long gone. Jacob searched the whole territory of the destroyed village, bumping into people's corpses and debris, and tried to find his Coco alive or dead, to at least give her a decent burial. Then a heavy stomping sounded behind him. Jacob stirred. He recognized those heavy footsteps. From somewhere from behind the rubble jumped out a huge, giving bomb. Jacob exclaimed. It was undoubtedly bomb goo, only very much more mature. A real giant. He was carrying a breathless female body in his arms. Jacob ran swiftly toward the beast, regardless of the warning shouts of his colleagues. In the caverns of the beast, he saw his Coco. It was absolutely certain. It was her. The same hair, the same delicate features of the deer face. The woman was unconscious, a deep gash shone on her neck. One arm dangled powerlessly precisely on a thin thread. Jacob's heart clenched painfully. Coco, my darling. Bombu carefully placed his precious burden on the ground, lowered himself beside her, and suddenly a terrifying blaze. Hammering themselves in the chest with long furry paws with things. Jacob felt for a pulse, hurt often and interrupting the first aid kit with all his might, he yelled. We can still save her. One of his friends ran a little closer and threw the first aid kit, fearing the giant gorilla. Jacob frantically tore open the packages, trying to do something for Coco, but it was already quite clear to him that they had arrived here too late. Suddenly, in the folds of the fabric of Coco's clothing, he caught some sort of movement, a soft cry. Hello, the woman spoke weakly and opened her eyes. She tried to find her baby with her eyes. There she was. Jacob held the wrapped baby up to her face. Look, she's all right. Jacob with one lip sang Coco in surprise. Jacob, take her, take her. She wanted to say something else, but she couldn't. A thin trickle of blood dripped from the corners of her lips. The doll twitched her whole body and closed her bottomless eyes forever. Jacob howled just as he had just roared a bomb bull jab not from Coco. The astonished coworkers crowded in the distance, gazing at this heartbreaking scene. They chatted quietly. Someone even wanted to take a few pictures, but the head of the expedition abruptly stopped these attempts. I'll keep her safe. Dear Coco, wiping away tears, said the man. Goodbye. The big gorilla carefully picked up the body of his foster mother from the ground, and in a few leaps ran away into the jungle. Honey, I'm home. Jacob opened the door and entered the apartment. How are you? Towards him ran out two cheerful, naughty children. A boy and a girl almost the same age. Daddy, Daddy, what did you bring us? Did they hang around their father's neck, climbing into his bags or pockets? Val, it's about time. How was the trip? His smiling wife came over and kissed him. Anna, it's fine. I brought you some presents from Australia. Dad, you brought me a kangaroo. A little girl about 3 years old asked hopefully. Dark-skinned, pretty with huge azure like seawater. Her eyes are inexpensive. He smiled and sat her on his lap. But I brought you this. Look, I like it. Thank you. The little girl brightened and skipped off to play with the new thing. In the evening, Jacob enjoyed the family coziness and watched how cheerfully play together their children with Anya. The wife was not easily given such a decision of her husband, and there was a time when they almost divorced because of this situation. But now it's all in the past. Little Alice, that's what he decided to call her, managed to melt the resentful heart of her adoptive mother, and she took her into the family and began to bring her up as her own daughter. Finally, Jacob was completely happy. He no longer felt guilty about Coco. She had once saved his life, and now he returned the favor. When his daughter grows up, he will be sure to tell her a wonderful story about the plane crash, secluded in the jungle, a village of its inhabitants, about a naive boy who underwent all possible horrors, lost in the jungle, and then met a beautiful set and fell in love with her without memory. He will tell her everything, show her old photos, and then she will definitely remember her wonderful and heroic mother.
Subscribe and click the bell. Molly admired her reflection in the mirror. A tall, slender woman with luxurious hair. She hardly recognized herself. The black dress of classic style shone with a steely sheen, which only emphasized the advantages of her figure even more. Suddenly, a suspicious rustle was heard from behind, followed by a whisper from Nancy's eldest daughter. She's so beautiful, like a cartoon queen." The younger Vanessa said affirmatively, "Aha." The girls thought their mother couldn't see them, but the mirror revealed their secret agenda. Peeping is not good. Molly turned around abruptly. The daughters squealed with delight. "Mommy, we were trying to be quiet. We just really want to see it all too." Vanessa messed up her nose, so you can hear it from 3 kilometers away. Molly grabbed the girls in an armful and kissed each one on the sun-scented top of her head. Wendy Vanessa, the message had nothing to do with it because the mirror gave you away. The older girl walked over and immediately clapped her hands together. "Oh, you can see everything. And we thought you wouldn't notice us." Suddenly, the little girl's voice faded. "Daddy's coming." After the sisters had secretly entered the parents' bedroom, the door remained open, so no one noticed the appearance of the head of the family. Stephen tried to give his voice a cheerful note, but his face expressed dissatisfaction. "Who's distracting our mom? Come on, shoo kittens to your room." The girls looked at each other and ran out of the bedroom. Stephen didn't even throw them a funny joke, which sometimes happened when he was in good spirits. Today the man had been depressed since morning, so even his daughters were irritating him. Molly, too, was all tense, awaiting her husband's verdict. Stephen took a few steps back and looked at his wife for a minute. It was so unbearable that the woman asked in a half-whisper, "What do you think?" "Nothing good. Couldn't you have bought something more decent with the money I gave you?" "Stephen, the only thing I could have bought with that money was a warm bathrobe. My parents gave it to me. I wonder why I'm the last to know. I told you to keep me in the loop, including financially. But it was my parents who decided to help me out. It doesn't matter. You don't live on an island where you could do whatever you wanted. But you have a family, so you have responsibilities and duties." The high spirits evaporated immediately. Molly cast a fleeting glance in the mirror and saw a dim-eyed woman emerge. Stephen noticed the movement. Look at yourself without averting your gaze. Now you understand why I always attend important events. You're in that shabby outfit you spent mad money on. You look like everything. I won't say the number of years out loud. Tears, resentment appeared in the woman's eyes. "Stephen, why are you making a spectacle of yourself here right now? You should have gone to your own corporate party. If you're embarrassed of me, I didn't stuff myself into the company." The man jumped up to his wife and looked into her face. "You're still raising your voice. You should be dusting me off. I provide for you all. I feed you. I bought this apartment too, by the way. I'm in terrible debt. And all for what? To make my wife turn her nose up at me. Stephen, why did you grab Molly's makeup and throw it all over the dressing table? That was my money too. So you'd better shut up." He headed for the door, but then he came back. "I'll give you half an hour to pack. Sam and his wife will pick us up. As for your reproach, I'm really ashamed of your appearance. Can't you see you look like a tortured codfish? I'd love to go to the party alone, but the chief has ordered all the staff to come with their soulmates. So I'm at your mercy, so you can consider my situation hopeless," and pouring his discontent on the unfortunate woman. Stephen already said more calmly, "Pays and really very unfortunate choice, but it's too late to change anything. And the hair, I think it's too inappropriate for your age. What's with all these frivolous aunts? I hope my girl's not in that condition. You'll see for yourself. I've prepared everything as usual." The husband went to tidy up his status persona. Molly remained standing in front of the mirror, and she wanted more than anything to tear off her dress and fall into the cushions and let her tears flow. But there was some truth in their reproach to Stephen. She was indeed entirely dependent on him. After all, even for the necessary feminine trifles, her husband allocated her monthly funds, and after every trip to the store, she presented him with receipts. And this had been going on for almost 10 years. From behind again, there were light footsteps. The daughters nestled against their mother, as if they wanted to comfort her. And the eldest, Nancy, whispered, "Mommy, and trust Daddy. You are the most beautiful in the whole world, and he scolds you on purpose because he is afraid." What is he afraid of? Don't you understand? What if while Daddy's at work, the Tsarevich comes and takes you away with him? It happened. Remember in that story you read to us, Vanessa, the other day? Molly laughed. Well, I'm not Sleeping Beauty. And there are no princes and princesses among my acquaintances. Anyway, go to your room. Daddy's gonna come in and swear at us again. This threat was followed by an immediate reaction. The girls flew out of the room with cosmic speed. Left alone, Molly corrected her makeup. She once again critically examined herself in the mirror. What a mess of hair on her head. In a minute, the design was evil. There was no trace of it. The woman went through her long hair and then invented Strand's beautiful herringbone and laid the braid on the side. It really did look better that way. For the umpteenth time in just one day, the woman caught herself thinking that agreeing with her husband in everything had become a tradition for her. She had grown accustomed to obediently following his orders, accustomed to his perpetual displeasure. It had gotten to the point where she was afraid to move at night to avoid waking Stephen. But the worst was that her husband takes such servile behavior as a norm. And not so long ago, things had been different. How could she not have noticed her transformation into a slave? This was not the first time Molly had faced this question. After all, 10 years in the scale of one human life is a long time. But it so happened that Stephen imperceptibly became for her not only the main person, but also the ruler of her fate. Unfortunately, she realized it too late, and now she has to bear all the insults and humiliations without complaint. But all this she is ready to endure only because there is a hope that one day she will see again that kind Stephen, who for her was from childhood the standard of a real man. Molly was too young to remember the details of their first meeting, but Jenna loved to recount how her 3-year-old daughter had declared to the world when a new boy was brought into their group, "This is my friend," to affirm that right. The little girl squeezed the baby's palm tightly and led him to the part of the room where the play corner was. The pupils of the younger group fell silent, and the adult witnesses of this touching scene smiled reproachfully. But no one objected to this distribution of roles. Then Molly was not distinguished by a soft character, and on any aggression on the part of her peers responded sharply. And her methods of fighting with opponents allowed the use of brute physical force. Therefore, Jenna often had to blush from the unworthy behavior of a small bandit. Christopher, learning about the mischief of his heiress, proudly declared our vein. "Therefore, we have no weaklings in the family." Jenna always said to such praise, "Next time you'll go after your daughter. I can't be the only one to take the blame for her bad upbringing." The man sincerely resented who dared to say such a thing, that fool. "That's what you're going to tell the teacher too, because she thinks you and I are failing in our parental duties." Christopher rushed in with an open mind to stand up for justice, but his optimism didn't last long. Within a week, his righteous fervor waned. and the loving father found any excuse not to cross the threshold of the kindergarten. True, since the advent of mentees in the face of fat, Stephen Molly slightly changed for the better. The same teacher who not so long ago criticized the girl's behavior, now at every turn praised her Molly a real angel. Stephen is clumsy, and not everything works out for the kid, and she tries to help him in everything. And such tutelage, it pays off. The boy tries to imitate his girlfriend, Molly, and in his school years was for Stephen either a beacon or a guiding star. If he did something on his own, he always looked back at the bullet. Her support for the boy was as necessary as air, but Stephen himself also tried to respond in kind. And even in the 3rd grade, the guy showed his fighting character when he was not afraid of the guys who were 2 years older. 5th graders decided to shake their younger counterparts, and they chose girls as their victims. Stephen stumbled upon the humiliating scene quite by accident. 3 girls from the class, surrounded by immature runabouts, were desperately crying. "Boys, we really don't have any money. We spent it all in the cafeteria." One of the bigger boys spit through his teeth. "What if we shook you like Pinocchio?" The girls cried even louder. But these tears are even bigger. Would the extortionists be aroused? One of them grabbed the smallest girl by the hood of her jacket. Stephen, without thinking of the consequences, grabbed some stick, and with it went to ram the enemy with a shout of freaks. Let the girls go. The hooligans clearly did not expect such a turn of events and rushed away. Saved classmates then told everyone about the courage of Stephen, and the young hero was embarrassed by his sudden popularity. True, his moment of fame was short. When the novice bandits realized that screwed up in front of the 3rd grade, they decided to take cruel revenge on him. And the next day, after the landmark rescue of girls under the eye of yesterday's hero painted a huge black eye, the rescued girls sighed and rolled their eyes prettily. "Stephen, you got it for us too. Now you can cheat off me at home for the whole quarter." In math, the 2nd classmate wanted to drag him into a sick dance class, but Stephen delicately refused all kinds of help and proudly said bruises are nothing. Scars adorn the face of a real man. But Stephen's popularity did not endear him to Molly. When classmates started circling him like flies, she seriously warned them. "He's my friend. We've been friends since kindergarten. And just because Stephen protected you doesn't mean he's going to hang out with you." The classmates didn't have to repeat themselves twice, and they quickly refocused their attention on another subject. But Stephen had already gotten a taste of popularity, and he was angered by Molly's interference. "Why are you meddling where you're not wanted? Maybe I don't want to be friends with you anymore." That statement annoyed him, but it didn't frighten Molly. The girl stopped paying attention to Stephen, and access to her notebook was closed to him. Of course, he could have moved to another desk, and many girls would have been happy to have such a neighbor. But something told him he shouldn't make it public. The relationship with Molly was ruined. The tense situation resolved itself. All the holidays at school were celebrated brightly, but with the involvement of their own talents. When the program of the Defender of the Fatherland Day event was drawn up, all that was left was to find worthy presenters. At the Pedagogical Council discussed various candidates, but the principal herself unexpectedly suggested that we're racking our brains here. In the 3rd, and there's a lovely couple called Molly and Stephen. One of the teachers objected. "They're very young." And that's great. Babies are always seen in a positive light, even if they make mistakes. A common cause brought the friends together again. They did an excellent job, and many said that it was the presenters who were the highlight of the concert program. Molly was in the crossfire of glances for the first time, and Stephen already knew the taste of fame. Then, after the concert, he suddenly realized that Molly could be the bridge from which he could jump more than once. This discovery both shocked and pleased the ambitious boy. He held out his hand to his girlfriend. "Molly, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I said some nonsense to you." The girl was embarrassed. She didn't expect Stephen to say such things. It was out of character. "Come on. Forget it, Stephen. I'm not angry." She smiled openly and immediately realized how much she missed their companionship. Friendship forever, then, Molly laughed. It overflowed her soul with joy, and Stephen sang out, "The friendship is strong. It won't break." A friend in a thin voice picked up, "Won't split the rains and the South." They sang the popular children's song selflessly, holding hands and looking into each other's eyes. And at that moment, they truly believed that nothing and no one could break their friendship, that the world seems very different when you're young. It's a well-known fact. Molly and Stephen were convinced that they should only step on the broad road of adult life, and they will walk on it easily and confidently. Although both of them did not have excellent diplomas, their chances of getting into a good university were high. At that time, there was a demand for lawyers and economists in the country, and the couple decided to apply directly to the capital's university. Molly had doubts at the last moment. Aren't we being overconfident? After all, this is not something, but a very serious institution. Courage beats cities. Remember that proverb. The girl realized that Stephen was encouraging them. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she agreed with him. But what doubt was growing? "I remember, but I feel uneasy. What's with all this downward spiral?" "Molly, I don't recognize you. You've always been brave. That was before. It's all the same at your home school, but here it's Moscow. Maybe you and I can find something a little more modest. There are plenty of good schools all over the country." Stephen became serious at once. "I'll try to prove to you the evil truth of life on my fingers. Indeed, there are many institutes in our beautiful country, but only the capital's universities have an impeccable reputation. Even if your diploma is full of C's with a few B's, the mere fact of graduating in Moscow will be a huge advantage when applying for your first job. I probably don't need to tell you that career growth depends directly on where you start." Molly looked at the guy as if she was seeing him for the first time. They had talked so much, knew so much about each other. Molly understood that Stephen wanted to achieve something, but for him to have such emphatic, pragmatic thoughts, she had no idea. He even seemed like a distant stranger to her now. "Stephen, are you thinking so strangely? I even get the impression you're repeating someone else's words. I can't deny it. I have my moments. But I don't see anything wrong with it. Look at you and me. I mean, we both come from average families. Our parents are positive people, real hard workers. How is that a bad thing? My dad has honorary degrees all over his wall. So what? Where do we put these props? What use is it? Stephen, are you talking crazy shit right now? It seems so to you, because you were brought up on outdated stereotypes. But life changes, and today we have different priorities. Because enthusiasm alone won't get you far. My father realized that a long time ago, but he didn't have time to readjust. He laid it out for me. The rules of life should be initially, as the great poet said, from the young nails to aim at achieving the main goal. Of course, at first it may seem unattainable, but if you set the right accents, everything will work out. Did you surprise me? I've never looked that far. I always thought it was like a computer game. You had to go from one level to the next. In principle, you have a good point, but the main goal should be immediately, using your comparison as a target. Stephen looked at her with his eyes. So Molly understood, and her arguments will not be heard, but still tried. Wait, Stephen, what if we don't get in? And I'm definitely getting in, and I'm sure of it. If I can't get in on a budget, I'll study for a fee. But that's a lot of money. My parents don't have that kind of money. She didn't understand how Stephen could say such a thing, as if in 1 second she became a stranger and an outsider to him. Oh, come on, was it just her imagination, or did she misunderstand? Turns out she got it right. I can't help you there. As they say, to each his own. By the time she graduated high school, Stephen's selfishness was evident even in the smallest things. One day, Jenna gently hinted this fact to her daughter. "Molly, I don't like to meddle in other people's affairs, but I don't like the way Stephen is using you. Don't you see that?" "Mom, it's just your imagination. We're on good terms. He helps me with a lot of things too. I don't notice it. Well, God be with you. The boss is the boss. They left Solnitnogorsk together. As they should. In such cases, the parents gave the admonition, having broken free chicks and believed that at the first time to conquer not only the capital, but the whole world. But Molly flew straight through. She didn't have enough points to get on the budget. But Stephen rejoiced because he passed the competition. Molly cried all day with resentment, but she didn't want to go back to her small town. A girl they shared a dorm with gave her advice. A lot of people fail after the first time. That's normal. The main thing now is not to miss a year. You can find out where you're short or learn some other useful profession. This option interested Molly, and she went with her neighbor to look for an educational institution. For a whole day, they passed more than a dozen colleges and schools, but everything was already packed to the brim. And only in one college of food industry there were a few free places. But the girls, tired of searching, were satisfied with the result. Molly thought that Stephen would be pleased when he found out that she would still study in the capital. The girl decided to tell him this happy news over the phone. But her friend's reply was a shock. You realize that college is a judgment. Now everyone will look at you as incomplete. I wish you'd come home. You could try again next year. Molly tried to change her friend's mind, but he firmly believed he was right. The girl called him several times, hoping for a meeting. But Stephen each time found 100 excuses to keep the date from happening. Evelyn, the girl they went to college with, noticed. I think your date is embarrassed of you. He's my friend. We didn't have any of that, and it's too bad. No matter what anyone says, but guys like consistency. Yeah, they might have an affair with your girlfriend on the side. But God forbid they get something they used to think was theirs stolen from under their noses. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm telling you to make your Stephen worry. You're an attractive girl, and you can have suitors. Evelyn, do you think it'll work? Are you sure your friend's gonna come running? How do I put this plan into action? It's very simple. Evelyn's method was simple, but most importantly, it required nothing. The executor was also quickly found. Molly was being courted by a guy who was nearing the end of his studies. John was a fan of the Bavarian business and dreamed of having his own restaurant. He was jokingly called the Bavarian Book in college because he knew 1,000 recipes and fascinatingly told about the national peculiarities of the cuisines of different countries of the world. John invited Molly to a cafe a couple of times, and she agreed to keep him company out of boredom. On the advice of a neighbor, the girl began to give the guy signs of attention, and soon he was following her like a thread behind a needle. For the first time holiday of spring, Molly came to visit her parents with John. The parents liked the young man immediately. Jenna he impressed with his knowledge of cooking. The mother whispered enthusiastically to her daughter so that the guest would not hear. Molly, this guy is a real treasure. He's a treasure. Make sure you don't let him get away so you can bite your elbows later. Mommy John is just a good friend of mine. What is it with you guys? Making plans for the future. There's nothing wrong with that, because all parents worry about their kids and wish them well. You already had a best friend, but he hasn't been around lately. He's probably embarrassed to be friends with a girl who's studying to be a chef. I mean, bankers rule the roost these days. Jenna talked about Stephen without mentioning his name, which indicated her strong resentment toward her daughter's former classmate. Molly marveled at how good a judge of character her mother was. But in remembrance of an old friendship, she still stood up for the one she was constantly thinking about. Mom, you're the one who says you can't judge a person indiscriminately. Stephen has a goal, and he's on his way to it at the moment. Freshman year in any school is the most difficult period. I admit that Eve and I have problems, even though I'm in college. But in the summer, if everything works out well, I will go back to university. That's the right decision. Here I support you in everything. The holidays flew by like a minute, and the guests had to return to the capital. But Evelyn's plan worked 100%. Literally, the next evening after returning to the capital, there was a knock on the room where Molly lived with her friend. When the girl opened the door, she was stunned with surprise. In front of her, with a bewildered smile, stood Stephen. "Hello, boy." It is not known from what secret place extracted a huge bouquet of flowers. "I'm sorry I'm late, but I wish you a happy spring festival. I couldn't make it earlier. You probably weren't expecting me." "You guessed. I haven't been expecting you for a long time. But what's an old friend for when there are so many suitors around? I heard you got a boyfriend. You guys are serious." Molly's heart was ringing with joy. She had no idea Evelyn's plans would bear fruit so quickly. "Since when did you become interested in my life?" "Molly, can I come in?" It's awkward to talk in the doorway. Yeah, sure. I'm sorry, but your visit is so unexpected that I'm confused about an old friendship. I mean, you're the one who stopped returning my calls. And since I'm not a vowed nun, I have every right to date. Yeah, of course, it's my fault. But you do realize that the life of a student..." The girl interrupted the guest. "Stephen, I understand it's hard for you. You sleep 3 hours a night. You have a goal, but you forgot one little thing. I'm a student too. Yes, the profession I'm learning isn't that prestigious. But if there are no cooks, bankers, and other professions will have a hard time." The young man looked at Molly as if he were seeing her for the first time. The girl noticed how he blushed to the roots of his hair. By this sign, she realized that her suspicions were not groundless, and Stephen was really shy of her. Society. But the fear of losing such a convenient and fail-safe defense still overpowered ambition. But soon there was another reason that made Stephen protect his friend from outside influence. The guy was pleasantly surprised to learn that in a few months Molly had learned to cook. One day the girl and her friend asked to visit Stephen. He agreed, but warned, "You just don't fall." "But we have everything Spartan." Evelyn did not hold back and barely crossed the threshold of the room. "This is not a room to live in. It's a real den. Okay. Outsiders, please leave. Molly and I will try to make this place look a little more decent." It wasn't 2 o'clock before the occupants, Kingerly, looking around, couldn't believe they'd gotten into their room. But even more, the boys were surprised when the temporary hostesses invited them to the table, in the center of which a large pot shone with pristine brilliance. The reaction from the hungry students pleased Evelyn immensely. It seemed to her that another minute's delay, and the boys would go into shock from the increased secretion of saliva. "From what was in your refrigerator, we could only boil borscht. So, dear hosts, don't be sorry for the modest table," but 4 sturdy guys were not up to etiquette, and they greedily pounced on the food. However, the excellent appetite did not prevent them from periodically complimenting the girls on the delicious food as if they were at home. "It's been a long time since I had such a hearty lunch. Today we have a real belly feast." The girls were satisfied with the result of the action, and the guys were inviting them to visit. "Girls, your borscht is like the elixir of life. Come again next time, we will buy more food. Maybe you can make us some cutlets." Evelyn winked, but it's true what they say that the shortest way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Today I was convinced of that. Molly was absorbed in her own thoughts and said nothing. Evelyn tugged her friend by the arm. "Molly, wake up. Listen, what do you think, Robert?" "Robert who?" "Well, the skinny, tall one. And the one with the glasses, he's not bad looking." "No, he seemed nice." The girlfriend's romance with the future banker spun so fast that in the summer the couple got married. The newlyweds rented an apartment, and Molly was left alone in the dormitory. But this loneliness was not long. In the fall, she entered the university on a correspondence course. Stephen also agreed that combining study and work is the best option for a couple who are going to become a family in the near future. Only in this generally happy picture there was no place for John. The guy saw from afar, shining at Molly in the company of a childhood friend, and understood everything without words. No, he did not hold a grudge against the girl, whom he really liked very much. But realizing that his chances were practically zero, he silently retreated. Then he could not suspect that many years would pass and he would play a major role in Molly's destiny. Jenna was unpleasantly surprised by her daughter's decision to marry her childhood friend. But most of all, the woman was worried about John, whom she liked very much. "Molly, have you thought this through? Stephen, he's a selfish bastard. You've had your share of grief with him. Mom, you're being weird instead of wishing us happiness. You make terrible predictions." Christopher did not interfere, but from his look it was easy to guess that he was not excited about the upcoming wedding either. Not until before the celebration itself. He still decided to talk to Molly. "Daughter, I just want to say, don't confuse childhood friendship with love. Are you sure Stephen feels that way about you?" "Of course he does, or he wouldn't have proposed to me." But as the emotions subsided after the wedding, Evelyn began to ask herself that question more and more often. All the burdens of family life she had to pull on herself. Even more complicated life, studies. Stephen advised his young wife to quit Molly University. "Why bother with your brain? You have a good profession. Very useful for the family, by the way. I love your borscht and everything you make." "Stephen, you're the one who told me to go for it." "That's right. But I think right now your only priority is our family. I want my home to be warm and cozy and filled with children's laughter. And what will we live on? Let now our parents help us a lot, but they're not going to be pulling their weight forever. I'm not gonna put that kind of weight on their shoulders. I've only got 2 years of school left. Then I promise that I will do everything I can to provide for my family." Molly listened to her husband's optimistic plans and suddenly asked Stephen, "Tell me honestly, why did you marry me?" This conversation took place during breakfast, and the man almost choked on a sausage sandwich with cheese. "Molly, is it permissible to ask stupid questions while eating?" "Well, most women suffer from this bad habit. But I'll tell you the answer to that. I've never even considered another candidate for wife. You and I know each other well, which is good for our marriage. Then you're a great hostess and a great cook. In short, I have complete confidence in you." "Stephen, what about love? Did you marry me for pragmatic reasons?" Molly was astonished by her husband's revelations. She had expected to hear from him quite different words, but he did not think it necessary to say them, even for the sake of propriety. The young woman felt humiliated and wanted to tell her husband everything. But Stephen caught her mood and beat her to it. "Love is a beautiful word, of course, and I understand perfectly well what a storm is brewing in your sensitive heart. But life is hard, and you can't get very far on love alone. For me, it's more important the material side and everyday life. And lyrics are a secondary matter. So you didn't marry me for love, you married me for convenience." Stephen looked at his wife as one looks at a hopelessly ill person. "Yes. What's wrong with that? I'm comfortable with you, and I plan to live my whole life that way. And thanks for the delicious breakfast." The husband still hadn't answered the big question, but Molly didn't dare to ask it anymore because she knew the answer. That day she realized how right her mother was. Everything inside her protested, and the voice of reason shouted, "Get away from him now, or it will be too late later. Where's your pride?" "Molly." The young woman did not heed the call and stayed. It was her first sacrifice, made on the altar of, she thought, of marital happiness. Stephen was a subtle psychologist and realized at once that he had won his first victory. Every day thereafter he methodically suppressed in his wife her own. His dictate was well thought out, and from the outside resembled the care of a beloved woman. Another advantageous quality was possessed by Stephen. He always acted proactively, not giving his wife a chance to recollect. Just a year of living together, Molly turned into a mountain maid of her husband. She fulfilled his every whim at the first request. When Stephen found out that they were having a child, he began to control her every move. Therefore, Molly had to leave the university after 2 years of study. Subsequently, she left in work, which gave her at least a small opportunity to realize herself. The only consolation for the young woman were children. A year and a half after the birth of Nancy, Molly again became pregnant. This period was the happiest in her life because Stephen loosened control and she could afford small weaknesses. Her husband simply adored his daughters and made plans for the future. We're not gonna stop there. You owe me another son. Evelyn was trying to make a joke. Stephen, come down to earth. We're already cramped in this rented apartment. Are you planning on having a third child? Don't worry, wife. Our living conditions will improve very soon. Molly knew that her husband was not used to throwing words into the wind and waited patiently. She did not pester him with questions because for several years of life together learned that unnecessary curiosity only makes her husband angry, and she didn't want to cause a scandal. One day her husband came home from work in a high spirits. He picked up in his arms, ran up to the neck of his eldest daughter. Well, my princesses will soon cross. We will have a big apartment in a new neighborhood. Molly was wary. Stephen, but where did we get that kind of money? Have you forgotten where your husband works? That's right, at the bank. I've already taken out a soft loan. Then we don't have any maternity capital. I even forgot about it. You should have. We could use the extra money now. By the way, I've already paid the deposit and all the necessary documents. I don't suppose you'd mind if I took care of it. Sure, Stephen. I don't know anything about legal matters anyway. Besides, you're doing this for the best interests of our family. Exactly. And I'm glad you realize that. Hopefully, happy news. You're gonna feed me tonight. The woman shook her hands. I'm sorry, darling. It's really great news. I'd forgotten all about it. I've had everything ready for a long time. And the first, and the second. Tonight, I've decided to make chicken vine. Stephen kissed his wife in the heat of the moment. And if you knew how much I appreciate moments like that. I'm Stephen too, and I wish there were more of them. But her husband didn't hear her. He went to the bathroom to wash his hands, from where his joyful voice came. Yes, I have more good news. I've been offered a position as head of security. Of course, I will have to go through some procedures, as it is a very responsible position. Molly handed her husband a clean towel. You'll do great. It's a really unusual day today. I even feel like the sun is shining brighter. All happy people feel that way. And it's very nice to see you happy. Stephen drew his wife to him and kissed her soundly. And it was a very different kiss from the one he had hastily bestowed on the woman as she ran off to work. It was a special time for the couple. Moving into a new apartment had brought them together. And everyone in the family was fully engaged in getting on with their lives. While Stephen disappeared at work, Molly was engaged in minor repairs to help the young family decided and parents. Even Nancy Vanessa tried to contribute to the common cause, but it was not always successful. When the renovations were finished, Jenna wanted to have a heart-to-heart talk with her daughter. Wendy, are you happy? Or are you trying to be? Mommy, have I ever lied to you? Why are you asking me? You look tired. It's been a long time since we've seen each other. You've changed a lot. Have I aged that much? I mean, it's become dull. And you look confused, and you're always eyeliner, as if you're afraid I'll read something in them. Molly sat down on the chair opposite her mother. Her condition was not hard to guess from the way she nervously rubbed the limp tablecloth on the table. Mom, even if I'm not completely happy, but only trying to portray it, there's nothing I can do about it. Yes, I often catch myself thinking that I dreamed of a different life. Yes, I feel like a bird in a cage all the time, and I'm aching to break free. But you know I can't afford it. I have kids, and they need a father. Stephen loves girls. They're his. Jenna cried softly. Daughter, what kind of life have you condemned yourself to? I mean, it could have been so different. What I can't understand is what happened to your character. You were so stubborn in your childhood and in your youth. Mom grinned bitterly. Do you know the answers to these questions yourself? Yes, it's my own fault for letting myself dissolve into my husband. All that was left of me was a shadow. I sacrificed everything else on the altar of marital happiness. I may have used a strong comparison, but it's the one that best fits the situation. I don't know what to advise you, but remember that you have family who will always help you. Thanks, Mom. But I still have faith that Stephen and I will work things out. Jenna didn't say anything. She felt in her heart that in this way her daughter was trying to hold on to the last hope that was about to disappear forever, like a star in the morning sky. If the first years of married life, Stephen still sometimes hears the voice of conscience. After moving into the new apartment, he stopped listening to it. He felt he was the master of his life, and anyone who didn't agree with this division of roles, he put a lot of pressure on. Of course, it was Molly who got the brunt of it, although the woman had recently lost all ability to resist. But strangely enough, it was this blind submission that threw the man off balance, and he had to make a lot of effort not to spill his irritation in public on his wife during the corporate party. When they arrived at the restaurant, where the event was held on the occasion of the bank's anniversary, the party was already in full swing. After a short introduction of the guests, the chief took Stephen aside. Your wife is a real beauty. Women in general are the jewelry of our lives. That's why they need to be treated with care. Molly felt awkward surrounded by strangers, but she was not bored alone for long. Suddenly, a familiar voice sounded nearby. What a surprise. How nice to see you here. Molly. The woman hardly recognized in the young, respectable man Robert, that longtime student who had won the heart of her dorm mate. I didn't expect to see you here either. Stephen didn't tell me you two were working together. You're not gonna believe this, but I'm just a guest at this party. I work for a company that works closely with the bank. What you don't know, Molly, is that your husband was the lucky ticket. Everyone else in our company has a more modest life, though none of us have any reason to complain. Wait a minute. Robert, why are you alone? Where? Evelyn. My wife's like the Flying Dutchman. You've probably heard of it. Evelyn appears like a mirage, then disappears. She's currently in Italy. You may not know that my wife owns her own restaurant, but that's not enough. She's got her sights set on a whole chain. Molly felt a painful tingle under her heart. She wanted to ask Robert something else, but Stephen returned. He nodded casually to a former classmate. Hi, we'll talk later. The husband wouldn't let go of Molly's hand. Stephen, where are you taking me? By the way, I'm hurting for nothing. I told you to keep a low profile. Now I'll find our place, and you'll wait patiently for me. The organizers refused from the traditional long table, and all the guests of the feast were seated at separate tables in groups of 6 people, so that the participants of the feast did not get lost. Each seat was marked coquettishly with a name tag. Stephen quickly looked up her last name. See, it says Smith. That's you and me. Sit and wait. I hope I'm allowed to go to the bathroom. Your irony is misplaced. Sit down. There's someone else I need to talk to. Her husband's behavior made the woman furious. She could barely contain her emotions. Stephen, why all the trouble? Why did you bring me here to ridicule me, so that I would be alone? As a scarecrow homogeneous not already sick of everything. The man shook his wife's hand and sang in her face. Imagine, I'd better be quiet too, otherwise I won't vouch for myself. And I'll deal with you at home. Never before had Molly seen her husband in such a state, and his last words really scared the woman. Around her there was a buzz of merriment, toasts and congratulations, but Molly felt walled up in a vacuum pack. She raised her glass along with everyone else, but barely killed it and put it back down before eating. The woman was not moved at all. Stephen, on the other hand, was very active and hardly ever sat still. He was having a blast on the patch near the bandstand. Molly immediately noticed that a gorgeous blonde in a gorgeous dress of sky blue color did not move away from him. At first, she did not pay attention to it, but during the next dance, she noticed how the strange woman pressed against her husband. Stephen's hand at this moment was below the partner's waist. Evelyn felt so disgusted. She wanted to wash off that fake filth, but it was uncomfortable to leave the table defiantly. She turned toward the dance floor. But neither Stephen nor that lady was there anymore. Noticing that no one was paying attention to her, Molly left the table. Only an unfamiliar man who was sitting next to her, but never paid her any attention. Regretfully said, "Where are you going so soon? The evening is in full swing." "I'm sorry, but I have to go." Molly went to the ladies' room to wash her hands, but she noticed a couple in a dark corner near the closet, hiding from prying eyes. The man and woman were comfortably seated in armchairs, but from their voices she recognized Stephen immediately. "Well, bear with me a little longer. Now is not the time to change anything." A hot female whisper was heard in reply. "Stephen, I've been patient for 3 years. Believe me, I can't have that old man around me. I'm sick of hiding these secret dates and all that. Emily, believe me, I want to be with you too. I have for a long time. But if your husband knows about our meetings, I'll be buried alive." The blonde laughed softly. "She has long known everything, but always forgives me little pranks." "Why?" "Because, sorry, this is a very delicate subject. Let's better run away from here to our nest." "And I can't. I'm there now, my wife. Be patient until tomorrow." Molly did not wait for the end of the conversation, and remaining unnoticed by the lovers, returned to the hall. There was an open terrace in the restaurant, where the already quite tipsy crowd was having fun. No one paid attention to Molly, and she slipped outside. A light breeze condemned her slightly, and she began to contemplate her next steps. But all plans were too bold for her to carry out. "It's all right. I'll tell him what I think tonight." The girls were already asleep, and Molly thanked her neighbor on the playground, who sometimes kindly agreed to look after the small templates. The large cash bill quickly disappeared into the folds of the elderly lady's clothes. "Molly, thank you. By God, it costs me nothing to do you a favor. All the more pleasure to do it, because your little ones are very obedient girls. Most of today's children are spoiled, and your little girls are always obedient and polite. Very little Vanessa even calls me grandma. That's so nice." The neighbor was in the mood for a long dialogue, so the line had to say goodbye to her. "Yes, your help is invaluable, and we will definitely reach out to you and your husband, if the girls have no one to leave them with." The door from the neighboring apartment slammed shut, and the woman breathed a sigh of relief, but not before she went into the nursery to admire her sleeping daughters. How near the door sounded footsteps. Molly immediately guessed that it was her husband. The sound of his footsteps did not bode well for her. Finding his wife in the hallway, Stephen began to nag her with an angry look. Why did she leave? What's with the smugness? I was just sick of watching this feast. The hypocrisy. You could have warned me. I could have, but I didn't want to. How do you talk to me? Stephen, I'm not your subject or your serf. I'm sick of this. Stop taking over my life. Even so, the man never took his eyes off his wife, which didn't promise a quiet evening either. Since when did you become so independent? Why such a bold claim all of a sudden? From the fact that I saw with my own eyes how you and the chief's wife were treating. Oh, you also watched me well. You want the truth. There's nothing left for me to do. How to seek fulfillment of my male needs on the side, because you're like an Egyptian mummy in bed. You're useless, and your borscht and cutlets are getting on my nerves. Husband's insulting words. Melissa's slaps became on the face. A tight lump went to the throat, and Molly felt that she was choking. Stephen, you're the one. It's all coming down on me. What are you? A brainless sheep to blindly obey my every word. But I thought, and I figured it out. This conversation is over. And it's a good thing you found out today. The end of our family drama was inevitable anyway. Going to cook your borscht somewhere else, although you can stay here as a housewife. Stephen Evil laughed in her face. Think about it. I hope I've made myself clear. Yeah, except for one little thing. Did you forget about the children? The man wrinkled his nose as if he had a sudden toothache. You can stay in my apartment for the time being, but I don't have time to babysit my daughters, although I love them very much. Stephen disappeared behind the bedroom door, but reappeared a moment later. He tossed a pillow onto the living room couch. "You'll sleep here tonight. This is your punishment for disobedience." That night, Molly did not close her eyes. She was scrolling through the chronicle of yesterday, by seconds remembering the beginning of their married life, but she never realized when exactly the process of destruction was started. That her softness was to blame for everything, she no longer doubted. In the morning, Stephen, as if nothing had happened, got up at the usual time, and in a cheerful voice, said to his wife, "Where's my breakfast?" Molly, too, on inertia, rushed into the kitchen. It took her only a couple minutes to prepare an omelette with cheese. Her husband loved that dish. To avoid confronting her abuser, Molly closed herself in the bathroom and turned on the shower. Through the noise of the water, she heard the front door slam on the kitchen table, a piece of paper on which her husband's confident hand had written just a few words. "I'll be late. You don't have to cook dinner." Molly's eyes went black in front of her. Trying not to wake the girls, she took out her anger on anything she could get her hands on. "Thank you, Master, for not letting them. Not cooking you dinner, and it's a good thing you showed up late. You're better off with that blonde than with your wife. She doesn't stink of borscht like me." Evelyn half-whispered promises of anger accumulated over the years at milk cartons, canned crumbs, apples, and cabbage. She larded the produce with some kind of exasperation with a knife and then sent it into the trash can. The splashes flew in different directions, and soon colored, juicy rivulets flowed from the walls. Letting off steam, the woman was pleased with her work. "That's just great. Now I must do the same with everything that comes my way. As my mommy likes to say, it's a start." Jenna understood without a word. When she saw her daughter and granddaughters at the door, Molly's eyes lit up. It was obvious from her demeanor that she was excited. "Meet the guests, of course. My precious ones come through. Jorah, look who has come to see us." Christopher kissed his daughter and granddaughters. The girls immediately began to pester their grandfather with questions. "And we'll have our own room. Grandpa, will you buy us toys? Of course, you'll have everything. At Grandma and Grandpa's house, you can even walk on your head." The girls squealed with delight and immediately began to carry out Christopher's instructions. Jenna helped her daughter unpack. "Wendy, you're all right." "Yeah, I decided to take your advice and start from scratch. You know how builders have a saying, ground zero. And in my life, it just so happens that yesterday I demolished an old building, even the foundation. Now I have to build it all over again. But I'm not afraid, even though I know it will be very difficult. And it was right to leave him. Stephen will be lost without you. Mom, he found a replacement for me a long time ago. I don't think there's another woman like you in the world. No woman would put up with an arrogant man like your Stephen. But don't worry with us. You won't be lost. And we'll help you find a job. I even have some thoughts on the subject." "That's interesting. Come on, Mommy. What are you up to? Remember Camille? Remember our town's first cooperator? She's in urgent need of workers. She's not doing well. She's in credit, and her bar barely generates any income, believing she's working at a loss." The next day, Molly was already on the staff of the local diner. Aunt Miranda's diner was located in the bus station. But in the town, the establishment had a bad reputation because there from early morning to evening there pushed fans of drunken drink. The landlady was delighted to see Molly. "Oh, thank you, Molly. Everyone's running away from me. I don't like the conditions. You'd think I'd be happy with these skewed faces. They come in at the crack of dawn. And they beg for a loan, and then they forget. The word hunt, the left-hand woman laid it on the line. All the nuances of working in an establishment of this type. But Molly was not frightened by the difficulties. She studied the peculiarities of the job for a few weeks, and then she told the landlady, "Why don't you sell baked goods? You could even organize a hot meal here. After all, there is such a flow of passengers at the bus station." Miranda gave the new employee a condescending look. "Do you have a Barbarossa plan?" "Of course, from the outside. Everything looks good. But what I made from the tent pies, believe me, much more than on the trade of beer drink. Look, I've done some calculations. Molly handed the landlady a notebook and sheets of paper with figures. She asked in surprise, "Are you familiar with this business?" "Not much. 2 years of college, then the same number of years at the university. I wanted to become an economist, but it didn't work out. But I still got some useful knowledge." That same evening, a satisfied Miranda beckoned Molly into the back room. "And I've been studying your checklist notes." Why do I say that? Because these numbers remind me of a cipher, like in the movies about spies. Of course, I don't understand this science very well, but I trust you. I'm in a bad situation. I need to fix it now. I agree with everything. But tell me, where are we going to do all this? I mean, that's going to require additional staff and space. Molly began to explain her plan. "We're going to rent the space. Yes, it would require additional funds, but we can rent the shop by the hour at the restaurant. I've already looked into it, and it would be inexpensive. I know your difficulties, and I can take out a loan. You don't need to hire staff yet. I graduated from college, and I even have experience in the Capitol Cafe." The hostess looked at Molly like she was mesmerized. Then she wrapped her in her arms. "You're my salvation." The woman was so emotional that she couldn't hold back her tears, and I'd given up believing in goodness. But as it turns out, there are still people who are ready to give a shoulder. "Molly, God sent you to me." Although not everything went smoothly at first. The bureaucratic hurdles were particularly annoying. Molly believed in success. One evening, Christopher remarked to her mother, "I've been admiring our daughter these days." In a good way, of course. The young woman laughed. "Daddy, that word always has a good meaning. But I didn't even realize that my person could delight." Jenna supported her spouse. "And you do not laugh at your father, and I completely agree with him. Did you really become like a person after you dumped your banker? You've blossomed. You've gotten prettier. You've got a light in your eyes. Dad, you've been praising me so much right here. Aren't you afraid I'll become a know-it-all?" "No, that's not typical of you. When you were a kid, you fought for the truth, defended the weak. And it's nice to see the old Molly now. So go ahead, my daughter, and start your own business." It was an accidental conversion by my father. The phrase is firmly planted in the innovator's brain. She'd never thought of running a business on her own before. Insecurity got in the way. But the first 6 months of working at Aunt Lisa's showed that it could become quite a real challenge. Later, the owner of the place herself began to talk about it openly. "Molly, you can't go to the back of the house. I still can't believe that my granddaughter has turned into a respectable establishment." Of course, the Alkis are not happy about the changes, but their opinion is of the least interest to me. But moms with babies and old grandmothers like to shop with us. But what I like most of all is the name Aunt Miranda's Pie. Succinct and beautiful. The owner did not exaggerate Molly's merits. Indeed, without her help, it would have been impossible to do such a job in such a short time. Molly already treated the pie as her own brainchild. About the enterprising woman became known in the region, and one day a correspondent from the newspaper came to them right in the middle of the working day. He clicked his camera a lot and asked a lot of questions. At the end of the conversation, he asked Molly, "Why don't you open your own business?" She thought for a long time and then honestly answered, "My life has changed so dramatically over the last year that I don't have time to turn over the chips. I just didn't think about this question." Just a few days later, Aunt Miranda showed up, pie in the air. "You guys, you're not gonna believe this, but I'm getting married. If anyone thinks that at my age, it is shameful to organize a personal life, I will say in all seriousness that it should be done without regard to years. I got lucky in such a big way, for the first time in my life." The staff, which were mostly women of all ages, were oohing and awing. And the cleaning lady even said in her heart, "Good people. If the cover has been stolen, then maybe I'll get some. Unlike that model on the runway." The woman walked through the hall, wiggling her hips and waving a mop. Everyone laughed heartily at the colorful number of the cleaner. but it was an ostentatious laugh. "What's going to happen to us now? Miranda, if you leave us, I don't think the new owner will want to keep us. Girls, don't be harsh on these. I assure you that you will not end up on the street, because your new owner will be Molly. So please love and pity." It was so unexpected for everyone that in the spacious room there was such silence that the hum of the refrigerator seemed like the roar of an airplane. But it was Molly who was most shocked. She tried to object to the hostess, but she invited her into her office with her crowning gesture. "I was so excited to surprise you, and I think I succeeded." Molly, your jaw dropped down in a funny way when I announced my decision in front of our friendly staff. The woman was used to the fact that her hostess's vocabulary consisted mostly of phrases not used in literature. What struck her most was the tone with which she was now uttering them. Miranda's whole being and was imbued with sadness. "You wouldn't believe, Molly, how my heart is torn to pieces, for I've grown attached to this town and to my bar. Bug, I'm sorry. Pie. But I can't miss my last chance to be happy at any age. And I've met a decent man. Maybe we'll make a model family. It's a pity that my darling lives in the far north, but my son is settled there too. So if things don't work out with my new husband, I'll live out my life with Kevin. You bet, Aunt Miranda. You'll do fine. But could you sell your business profitably? I could, but I can't trust my business to just anyone. And you're the one person I have 200% confidence in. I will try to justify your trust, and I really hope you will visit us." It took a few days to sort out the legal details. Under the terms of the deal, Molly had to pay her former landlady an almost symbolic sum. "You've done a good deed for me, and I'd like to return the favor. After all, not everything in this world is measured in money. I really want things to get better for you." Miranda sincerely wished Molly success, and the words of this kindest woman were heard in heaven. Becoming a full-fledged owner of the pie, Evelyn began to plan the expansion of the business. Soon she bought a small restaurant, which was located near the pie shop. The more successful Molly's business went, the more friends she made. They were mostly men who were eager to win the favor of a single woman. Of course, some were annoyed by the businesswoman's success. The list of the woman's bitter enemies also included the parents of her ex-husband. When Molly disappeared with the children, Stephen believed that she would return. "Nothing will crawl to my feet and will still beg like alms that I took her back. My wife is not fit to live on her own. She can't do anything. And she has no education. She'll just get a job in a diner." These were the predictions Stephen made in the company of friends. On the occasional outing, the boss's wife, he wouldn't get involved for purely personal reasons, but Molly's place was quickly taken by a young female employee of his bank. The man kept in touch with her parents, so he was aware of the affairs of his runaway wife. When he found out she'd gotten a job at the bar, his joy knew no bounds. I told you I wouldn't be surprised if she married a farmer or a chauffeur. But Stephen's triumph was short-lived. Molly filed for divorce and alimony. It was a twist he never expected. In a burst of emotion, he dialed his wife's number, but she abruptly cut off his stream of invective. "Stephen, now you and I are going to settle everything through the courts. Oh, I almost forgot. The apartment wasn't just bought with your money. In case you haven't forgotten, there's maternity capital. So your daughters have every right to a part of the capital's living space. I hope you won't dispute that fact." The banker was unpleasantly surprised by this news, but then he got some startling information from his parents. When he found out that Molly, in addition to the pies, bought a restaurant, he had a fit of rage. "Where'd that miserable woman get the money? She couldn't buy anything without my permission. And here's a whole restaurant. There's only one way to do it. The old way, but it works reliably, and it is necessary to break the horns of this benefactor who sponsors my wife." With this monologue, Stephen forgot that Molly is no longer legally his wife. The woman herself did not even realize what plans of revenge her ex-husband was hatching. She tried not to think of him. If the past inadvertently broke into dreams, she woke up in a cold sweat. The girls rarely remembered their father either. Nancy, the eldest, went to school, and Vanessa went to kindergarten. That year, winter started suddenly. Still in the evening it threw rain, and in the morning everything was freezing. By lunchtime, it started snowing. In a matter of hours, huge snowdrifts grew in the streets. Molly stayed late at the restaurant and hurried home. She felt uneasy for some reason. Someone invisible whispered to her that she should check the pie. To cheer herself up, the woman said out loud, "It's only 200 meters away. I'll go check it out just in case. God forbid, a short circuit or some other nonsense." Gusts of wind or steel directly in her face, and it took her half an hour to travel the short distance along the line. But barely had she reached her destination, a new surprise hit her. She saw a human figure on a bench, almost completely covered in snow. It was a man. I'd given him a bad case of the booze. My God, he's going to freeze. Is it possible to get drunk to the point of unconsciousness? She began to shake this man, who was not at all like the local lovers of strong drinks. The man was wearing an expensive coat and brand-name pairs of shoes. The odor of good perfume interrupted the unpleasant smell of booze. The man did not respond to her active actions. He only mumbled something inaudible and took a few deep breaths. Molly turned the sleeping man over facing the light and was stunned. In front of her was John, whose existence she had already completely forgotten. She began to shake her former beau with renewed vigor. "John, wake up. What brings you here?" Suddenly, he responded with a memorized tongue. "Not what, who. For your information, I took a cab because I wanted to find someone here." "Where'd you get so worked up?" "John, do you even recognize me?" The man stared at her face for a long time, and then straightaway unfolded. "Evelyn, I've been looking for you, but I've been very well received here." John struggled to get up from the bench and looked around in surprise. "So while I was asleep, winter began. Am I an ant or a dragonfly?" Molly laughed. "We'll figure it out later. Be thankful I found you. You'd definitely be mending on that bench before morning." Jenna was somehow not surprised to see Molly in the company of a frozen John. "Oh, what's going on? I didn't mean for this to happen." "Here, Mom, please elaborate." "Then, daughter, don't swear at me anymore. But John called me when I heard you divorced Stephen and decided to come here. Things didn't work out for him either. He'll tell you all about it later." Jenna rushed to rescue a frozen guest. Molly never ceased to be amazed at her mother's resourcefulness. It was only the next day that John was able to have a normal conversation with her. He not only froze in the street, but also felt very bad. One thing Molly realized for sure: John had simply fallen in love with this hospitable little town with equally hospitable residents. They were the ones who had gotten him so pumped up, albeit at his expense. But that didn't matter anymore. After a hot soup and a crumb of strong tea, the man was ruined for good. Molly separated him on the couch and covered herself with a plaid. Jenna sighed. "Such a good man. So unlucky in life. Mom, what's his problem? There's no way I can believe that you, having talked to him for so long, don't know anything about him." The woman waved her hand. "I know, of course, but no details. John got married, started his own business, quite profitable. Some kind of restaurants or cafes. And when things got good, his wife left him. She left him without a business. Don't think he doesn't drink. It's just something came over him. But he said he's not gonna give up. Starting from scratch. That means starting from scratch. Mom, are you so worried about him?" "Molly, come on. You know John is a good man. And if Mom had her way." "I'm not talking. How are things at work?" Molly is tired, sitting down. "You know, I can't say it's bad, but..." Her mother crouched down in front of her, like something's missing, not a highlight, or I'm missing some detail that's right in front of my nose. "Molly, I think you're getting too lost. In such a short time, your restaurant has become one of the best in town." Molly's got her thumbs up. "Exactly, Mom, one of the best, and I want the best." Jenna smiled. "I recognize my daughter, and you know what I'll tell you. If you want it, you'll get it. And I know you. Thanks, Mommy. I want to go to bed early tomorrow. The chef had a grandson, so he asked me to take the day off. Okay, go to bed. Molly turned around on the doorstep. Mommy's like a girl. I must be a bad mom. The girls are fine. Don't worry. And you're a good mom. It's just hard for you all by yourself right now. And your father and I don't know anything about it to help. Wendy hugged her mother in a fit of emotion. What would I do without you? Early in the morning, she kissed the sleeping girls, ran off to the restaurant. There was a lot to do, and soon she forgot completely about everything. Stephen threw his shirt with annoyance in the face of his new pasora. I do not understand. Is it so difficult to throw the shirts, the machine, and just iron them? The girl calmly threw the shirt on the floor and continued putting on her makeup. Finally, she pulled herself away from the mirror. Probably not. Stephen was furious. Of course not. Then I don't understand why you won't do it yourself. He even choked with rage. And me. And I have to wash my own shirts. But I certainly don't. And anyway, I've been thinking, I'm not happy about this. Stephen watched with huge eyes as the girl quickly threw her things into her bag and sent him an air kiss. It just couldn't be. How could it be? Somebody out there. And just walked out on him like that. No, this is all Molly's fault. She was the first one who dared to do something he didn't want her to do. Stephen struggled to find a clean shirt in the closet. He breathed out a sigh of relief. It was laid out, apparently still Molly's. And then he was so furious. He must suffer here, and he'd be ruined. The businesswoman was late. It's funny if she's an illiterate fool. This business makes money. Although his mother said she had blossomed, and the girls were well dressed, he didn't want to believe it. Somehow he was absolutely sure that if he called Molly, she would come crawling back on her knees. Except, and that wasn't the plan. She should have just had to crawl over and apologize. He would forgive, of course, but not right away. And he'd make some conditions and rules for her. Stephen straight up daydreamed about making up rules, but then shake it off. You might not even make it to work on time that way. As soon as he ran to the bank, he was called to the chief. Stephen was surprised and even grimaced. He didn't really want to talk to the man who was the husband of his former mistress, but there was nothing to be done. Stephen was still a servile man, although he had Napoleonic plans. May I? Come in, Stephen. Stephen went to the table and only now saw that at the table in the corner of the office sits Emily Berry, smiling at him like that. Stephen is even coldly offended. And she's just what she needs. They parted not very nicely, or rather, very ugly. Stephen's head was already spinning. He'd just found out that Molly had filed for divorce. And then there's Emily. So, our dream has come true. I can move in with you. Stephen dumbfounded and looked at her. Are you saying you're gonna leave your husband? Well, of course I am, honey. We've talked about it so many times. He wrinkled his nose like a toothache. It's true what they say, beauty and brains are incompatible, and you're going to work. Emily fluttered her eyelashes in surprise. Why? Why? I doubt that your money bag will give you a generous parting gift, but keeping me in my place is out of the question. Emily stared at him for a while. Then she said, so you don't want me in your life? Emily, you do the math. But Emily was already in a tizzy. She screamed so much that Stephen grabbed his head and just pushed her out of the apartment. To be honest, he was very worried at first. But he complains to his husband. And then what? But it seemed to pass. Now, watching her in the chair, he realized it was nothing like that. People like her don't forgive. Stephen, I have an offer you can't refuse. Stephen tensed up. I'm listening to you. We need to help our office. It is not so far away. Only 300 kilometers from Moscow. Stephen shrank back. That's it. They're gonna send him to some shithole and forget him. Don't worry, it's only for a few months, and then you can go back to work. Stephen understood perfectly well that he had no choice and waved his head doomfully. But the surprises didn't end there. He stayed in some Pinsk for almost 6 months. He came to the apartment on weekends to sleep it off. He waved it off because where he was forced to stay, hot water outages were the norm. He knew that a young employee was temporarily performing his duties and was sure that he would fail him in his work. But he was wrong. The young employee not only did not screw up his work, but made some adjustments that pleased his boss. Anyway, when Stephen finally returned, he was left with his hands in the air. "Sorry, Stephen, but your successor is doing a much better job than you. What am I supposed to do? You promised I'd get my job back. But you don't think I came back to my position at the expense of the bank. You can go back to your old position, or you can look for another one, if you're not happy with it." Stephen wrote his resignation letter in the full belief that he'd be ripped off. But of course that didn't happen. He blamed Molly for everything, absolutely everything. He had a thought in his head that he should go and see how she was doing, especially since he had kids there. Stephen liked that thought. He even called his mother. "Oh, Stephen, I don't know if you should come. Molly's doing really well. I don't think you're gonna like it. I mean, she's doing really well. Would you say her diner is making a good profit?" Stephen laughed, but his mother didn't support his mirth. "She's got more than one restaurant now, and I know she's opened one in a neighboring town." Stephen even choked on his saliva. "Mom, she's got a rich patron. But somebody's got to give the fool a clue. What should she do?" Before we could say those words, Stephen quit, but it didn't matter. It was time to visit my daughters, and at the same time to visit my wife. To look her in the eye. She's been on my payroll for years, and look at her. He didn't say anything else, just hung up. "Well, Molly." Stephen suddenly turned around, wondering what he had in his life. Nothing. Not even a job. Not even any of the ladies around him. Of course, when he was on the horse, everybody was interested. And when he fell down, everyone just passes by and pretends they don't know. Molly was so busy that day that she forgot all about John. But he didn't forget about her. He showed up at her restaurant just before lunchtime. "Can I sit here in a corner?" Molly smiled. "Sure, if it's not boring. I'm having a banquet tonight, and I don't have a cook. So I've got to make do." John resolutely took off his jacket. "There's something to change into." Molly looked at him in amazement. "Jesus, I'd forgotten that you're the best chef ever." John modestly conceded. "Well, I guess you're exaggerating, but I can do something." In the evening, tired and both happy, they accepted praise from the visiting guests. One of them came up to them. When everyone was leaving, "I live in another city, but I really liked it here. What if I invite your team to my mansion to prepare everything for an anniversary for about 100 people? As you know, money is not a problem." John and Molly looked at each other. The woman immediately thought that the same immediately could buy a new oven. And a lot of other things. After a couple of weeks, Molly decided to ask John what their future plans were. "Molly, I don't know what to say. Let's talk like adults." Molly blushed for some reason. Jenna immediately hurried off on some important business. "Okay, let's do it." She realized that talking about work wouldn't be the end of it, but she was ready. Every day, Molly realized more and more what a mistake she had made. Once upon a time, John was the complete opposite of Stephen. Nancy and Vanessa literally never left his side when he was home. If they never even tried to approach their father with their problems, they never hesitated to approach John. "Molly, you know I called your mom for a reason. I didn't just come here. When I found out you'd left your husband, and I wanted to tell you right away, so I wouldn't be dragged down by reticence. I realized when I saw you that nothing has gone away at all. I still want to look at you and admire you. You know, maybe it's for the best that there's nothing keeping me there anymore. I wish I could start over from when you and I first met." Molly stood up, walked to the window. "I don't know what to say to you right now." John jumped up. "There's no need to say anything right now. Let things be the way they are. It's not like I'm asking for an answer. It'll come on its own. And about everything else, I'd love to work at your restaurant." Molly approached him a couple months later. "John." He understood, gave her a hug. "And I'll make you and the girls happy." I promise. Stephen continued to look for work. The money was disappearing at a disastrous rate. Now he didn't understand how this Molly managed to run the house on the sums he was giving her. No, he was not a fiddle. At the time, it had seemed to him that he was giving away very substantial sums of money. Now he realized that to live well, he had to get by, and he'd long since gotten used to that. Finally, luck turned to him, but not in his face. He was offered a position as a petty clerk in one of the banks. Do you even know what position I was in? Of course I do. That's why we've made it easy for you. If you don't like it, you can keep looking. Don't get me wrong. There's no such thing as a bank. And it is one thing when a young, inexperienced employee comes and we invest in him what we need. Or a person who is used to working differently will come to us, and it is very difficult to retrain him. There was nothing left for him to do. How to agree? At least he had time to pay the rent. Then he remembered that there was a court-assigned part of the apartment for Molly and the girls, and that Molly could claim her share at any time. Of course, he didn't believe that, but it was too weird the things his mom had told him about his ex-wife. Closer to summer, he finally got ready to go back to his hometown. He didn't know why he was going, whether to visit his mother or to see Molly. Stephen only remembered that he had children there when talking to his colleagues. All along the way, he made plans on how he'd smear her morally. Clearly, for a town of this caliber, any diner is good. Of course, he'd love to rub her face in every flaw. As luck would have it, his path led through the square where the renovated restaurant was located. Money was tight. Stephen wasn't going to pay, though. Would Molly have the conscience to take money from the man who fed and clothed her for so many years? He parked, took a look around. It's a good location. It's close to the Park movie theater. Traffic's good. Molly really did it, didn't she? Stephen's teeth chattered. He clenched his fists. But you'll be sorry you didn't have a quiet life. He pushed the door open with determination. Molly, there's a vegetable delivery, and it's bad. David doesn't want to sign that they're bad. Molly raised her hand. So Molly, be quiet. Molly was the new manager at the restaurant. Young girl, smart, characterful. There was only one flaw in her. As soon as she got nervous, there was a moratorium, so no one could stop her but Molly. Calm down. I'm gonna go talk to David. If Molly had John, he'd be all over him. Well, you know John's out getting new furniture for the banquet hall. I know. I can't wait for him to get here. Molly. On the one hand, it was a shame that so much hope had been pinned on John, as if she meant nothing. And on the other hand, it was a good thing. She'd have to leave the restaurant for a while. This way, she'll be completely at ease. John will handle everything. The woman rose heavily from the table. She's 2 months away from giving birth, and she can barely walk. She felt better when she was carrying the girls. Maybe she was younger, or maybe it was the girls. David, when he saw her, he went down. What man could argue with a pregnant woman like that? He got upset and sighed. Signed some paper. David, you promised my restaurant only the freshest. Well, where am I gonna get fresh? And where do I put the old ones? I thought we were paying you well above market price just to bring in fresh. Yeah, I remember. But I have to try to sell my produce. I'll send my son in an hour. He'll bring something else. Molly smiled. What's he got to do with it? He's always looking out for me. She returned to the office, just wanted to sit down. But then Kelly was back in the office. Molly. Kelly, is there a visitor demanding to see you? At the table, at the premiere. What's going on? Kelly shrugged. I don't know. He seemed happy, but at least it's all eaten. God, what kind of day is today? Molly moved and into the hall. I've had a headache since this morning. At home, the flu was calling the girls. Looks like she wants to be sick too, and she can't be sick. She has a son who won't like it. Molly stroked her stomach, smiled. She remembered how John had reacted to the news that they were having a baby. He'd stood there for a while, just staring at her, and then he'd knelt down and pressed his face against her belly. and I thought I'd never hear those words again. I'm kind of at peace with it. Thank you. She walked down the hall, climbed 3 steps, and froze. Stephen was sitting in front of her, smirking. Something was starting to stir in her soul that made her shoulders slump and her head draw back. But Molly quickly came to her senses. There was nothing more to it. She wasn't dependent on him in any way. In fact, Stephen, she's nobody. Stephen, what wind? Yes? I just came to see what gray, uneducated women are up to these days. He saw her belly, smirked at the sherry. That you miscalculated while you were wooing your virtues. Molly felt nausea coming up to her throat. This has nothing to do with you. Why did you call me? Have you changed? The angry snarl backfired. Stephen, I don't have much time. He stood up like he used to. You always had plenty of time for me. Then tell me what you didn't like, will you? You ran away from the truth. But you're the truth. You're stupid. You're ugly. And you're nothing in bed. I don't know what you're offended about. The nausea was becoming unbearable. But Molly smiled in response to her ex-husband's words. Is it just me, or do you sound jealous? Have you seen yourself? Stephen, shirt not fresh on your pants, blisters on your knees. Maybe some people wouldn't notice, but not me. What about your perfect net? You're always perfect, but you're surrounded by suckers, or maybe you're not so cool anymore. She wanted to leave, but Stephen grabbed her arm hard and painfully. And I haven't given you permission to leave yet. Let go, it doesn't hurt. Molly jerked her arm sharply, and Stephen brought his face closer to her. I feel like you owe me a lot. Stephen, let me go. Do you hear me? You are nobody, you have no right. He squinted angrily himself and abruptly let go of Molly. She couldn't keep her footing on the top step and flew screaming downwards. The height was not great, but her position was. Molly fell right at the feet of her husband, who arrived and went looking for her. Molly. The man knelt down. An ambulance quickly. The staff were already running towards him, and John raised a heavy gaze to Stephen. And that's you. Stephen paid the price. He knew this guy from somewhere. He just didn't know where yet. Stephen realized he had to run. He'd better hide now. But he didn't have time. A fist met him on the last step. John, will you answer for this? Are you gonna answer for everything? He ran out of the restaurant, but no one chased him. Molly was falling into darkness, and then out of it came an unbearable stomachache. So much I wanted to scream. Be patient, honey, just a little bit patient. Jenna took the girls. Christopher said he'd give his ex-brother-in-law a proper welcome. He said he had the strength to throw him down the stairs. Molly smiled weakly. Daddy can. Pierced through her whole body again. Be patient, darling. We're here now. Someone was talking over her. Then they were taking her somewhere. She felt a prick in her arm, and it felt very light. Molly closed her eyes. John couldn't find his place. He paced up and down the hallway until an orderly yelled at him. You're walking like a pendulum, but it doesn't make you feel any better. And you won't let me mop the floors. He looked at the old woman confused. I'm sorry, and sat down. She approached him, wife. Oh, don't you worry. We have very good doctors. Thank you. The phone rang in my pocket. Yes, it was Jenna and John. How's it going? How's Molly? The woman was crying. I don't know anything yet. She's in surgery. John, that creep Stephen. He set a pie on fire. How? Just like that. They caught him, but they couldn't save the pie. No one got hurt. No, it was nothing. John, why don't you call me when you know something? Okay. He just disconnected the call when the doctor came out of the door. John stood up and stared at him in silence. Why are you staring at me like that? You'd better watch your wife. About 15 minutes later. And it's unlikely the kid would have been saved by now. You're a premature baby, of course, but a strong one will gain weight quickly. So do not worry. John noisily exhaled. Molly and Molly, your mom. True, you will not be able to have children. We have 3. Well, that's good. John suddenly stepped toward the doctor. Thank you, hugged him, then grabbed his phone. Jenna, the boy's fine. Molly too. We're gonna build a new one. And way cooler than the first one. Wendy opened her eyes and immediately remembered what had happened. She put her hand to her stomach and froze in horror. Immediately her husband's smiling face appeared above her. Don't worry, everything is fine. Our son is alive and will soon be perfectly healthy. Anchor, Wendy, you know. He took her hand in his. When I realized I could have lost you, I thought about how I don't need anything here without you. What's my point? I love you so much that I didn't even realize it myself. Molly smiled, and I love you very much. They didn't get discharged until a month later. Molly was a little nervous. John had only been around for a few minutes lately, and then he'd run off. She couldn't figure out what was wrong. This morning she saw on the news that her pie shop had burned down a month ago. She was furious. Why hadn't he said anything? But she was building him houses. They were driving down some strange road. Why are we driving here? I want to show you something. Isn't that leftover pie? John turned to her. How long have you known? This morning. I just didn't want to worry you. The car had stopped. They were standing in the square just past Chelsea's, her restaurant, and next to them a small building with a nice sign pastry shop at Sophia's. As you realize, on the other side of town, the pastry shop at Nancy's. Molly felt tears forming in her eyes. John, you and me. John, I remember her. And converted. Molly snuggled into his chest. Well, why was I such a fool and didn't marry you right away? Well, we all make mistakes in life. But if we take our time, our mistake will be our last. Jenna will nail us because she almost cooked all night, and the girls helped her. Molly laughed. She looked at her son, who was sleeping sweetly. Yes, we have to go. Our grandmother is strict. A week after we returned, the candy stores opened. A lot of people had gathered. Molly was worried. John, on the other hand, was completely calm. He now knew that nothing would ever destroy the happiness of their big and strong family. And on top of all this, he had brought 2 pastry chefs from the capital. He had forgotten to tell the line about it, and now he was afraid to. Just a few days ago, there was a trial. Stephen confusedly said that his ex-wife had brought him to such a state. He explained that she had taken away his luck, and in fact, she should be tried. And Molly suddenly stood up. I want to drop the lawsuit. Let him live free. John only then realized how much Molly had punished Stephen. At first, he didn't understand such an impulse, and when Stephen stopped next to them and said, it turns out you didn't do the honest rednecks, so I hate your debt now. John stood up, and Stephen quickly headed for the door. John looked at Molly. She finally smiled. What's the matter? Let him suffer a little. It won't last long anyway. John laughed. Yes, you are a dangerous woman. Molly replied with a smile. I'm just the most loved and loving.